of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll take roll call. Everybody is here except for Mr. Prokofiew. Is there any public comment from the board? Seeing none, is there any public comment from the public not related to any of the agenda items? All right, we'll get into our first appointment, which is an A&R plan for 83 Boucher Road and 99 Boucher Road, Lot 10, Country Road. You can come up to the mic, and if you just identify yourself for the record, please.
Okay, I don't have one of the large plans, you have them.
Yep. Could you just state your name and address?
My name is Brian Herrick, 83 Boucher Road. John Herrick, 99 Boucher Road, and Robert Herrick, what is it, 78? Boucher Road. Three properties involved that we're looking to do a small land swap at the end of all three properties is what's depicted on the surveyor's map. And essentially, that's what it is. It's not a subdivision of the actual lot. I sent a letter along to try to explain what it was and ask for variance on the topology of that. It's about a less than a half acre is what's being transferred. The large property is 27, almost 28 acres. My property is about 4 acres, and Mickey's property is about 2.5 acres. Taking some property from my land, but I'm also taking some from 27 to keep mine the same, so it's still about 4 acres, which would be the same from assessor standpoint. The 2.5 acre lot is adding the extra third acre, and the 27 acre lot is where the property is actually coming from. So what we'll be doing is I'll be taking a little less than 4,000 feet, transferring it to the 2.5 acres, and then my brother John will be transferring the rest of the property to that other one, and that's what's depicted in that triangular shape in the plan.
Does anybody want to do a large plan? I wasn't.
Yeah, see, do we actually have an A&R plan? Because the one that was in the email was virtually non-legible. All right, so we have parcel C.
Do you want me to come back and explain it to you?
Can you just explain what you're doing here with the parcel B and parcel C? This is the swamp here?
This here is 4 acres. This here, right here is the 27 acres. That's John. And this area here is the 2.5 acres, and that's Robert. This property right here is being taken and added to this. So this property here has been taken out, mine. So this and this is keeping us at 4 acres.
Okay.
This will be added to this, and this will lose what that is, which is approximately half acre or less.
So today, this one just goes like this?
Today, the property line is right here. The dotted lines are the property line. If this is approved, then these dotted lines will go away, and this will become the new area.
Okay, so I mean, it seems legitimate. It's not adding, it's not making a lot or deleting a lot.
No, it's not making.
Just out of curiosity, is there a reason for the?
Yes, this is the septic area.
Ah, so he's putting a new septic system here, so he needs this land. Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
And the Slow-Smith design is the one that's gonna, if it's approved, the design of septic, he's already looked at it. That's why I think they put on there, it's a small land swap.
Yep. All right, it makes sense to me now.
What zone is this in? There's no zoning.
This is outlying.
There's no zoning information on it. Neither one of them meet the frontage requirement, and it's not making them any more or less non-conforming, right? So this is,
They don't have 100 feet of frontage?
well, this one shows 50, And I don't know, they don't show,
Yeah, well, is that the 4-acre lot?
the 4-acre lot shows a 50-foot
So
frontage.
that's a
On Birch.
reduced frontage lot, so it has twice the required lot area.
Okay, so this one over here has a 30-foot frontage.
Well, that's something that lot exists.
Country Road, okay.
Yeah, so it's not making them any
It's
more.
not making, it's actually making it more, it's not changing the conformity.
Correct.
Do we need to approve the waiver?
There's already a house on Lot 10?
Excuse me?
There's already a house on Lot 10?
I'm sorry, I can hear you.
Is there a lot on House 10?
There's already a house on Lot
No,
10?
there is not.
There's no house on Lot
No.
10.
Oh,
So this,
That's not a,
so they're expanding it to put a septic, but it's not buildable because there's another frontage, or they?
Well, it
going
is,
for
it is
a-
buildable now, it's on, it's declared a buildable lot, and they tried perking earlier, years ago before, and now that's where they perk, that's the reason for the land swap.
So they went for a dimensional variance to get that approved?
I wouldn't be able to comment, I do not know.
well, if it's existing non-conforming, then it's
You wanna explain
buildable,
it?
But the A&R doesn't necessarily grant in the A&R.
No, the A&R does not grant any statement of compliance with any zoning or buildability standards.
And that's up to the zoning commissioner to determine that.
Correct.
So if they went for a building permit and couldn't get a building permit, then they would go to the ZBA, so they don't have to go to the ZBA
Okay.
prior to us approving the A&R, correct?
Correct.
And you realize that as well, that this approval doesn't necessarily make it a buildable lot. That's something you would have to confirm through the zoning commissioner. And if he couldn't issue a building permit, you would then have to go to the ZBA.
Well, I think, yes, you're right, but I think Mickey's gone through the things with the lot. It's been a buildable lot, bylaws change it, and I think he has a waiver to, to make it a buildable lot if he can perk and build and stuff like that. So that's the reason for this.
And there is a request for a waiver for the topography plan. And that's towards the back of the packet. Is your lot gaining land?
Excuse me?
Is your lot gaining land?
What?
Is your lot gaining land? Are you gaining square footage to your lot, or are you just
She's staying
It's
about the
keeping it the same.
Okay,
Hundreds of it.
all right.
And that was the reason why I made that change, so my lot would stay the same.
Right.
And the large lot would be the only one that really lose.
Okay.
And I tried to do it in such a way that it wouldn't affect driveways, stuff like that. And make the lines kind of reasonable.
And the only frontage, there's no other roads not shown on that plan, that would be off, what's that one? Country Road would be the frontage off the...
No road
where the
frontage is
house-
changing.
Okay.
My acreage might be a tenth of an acre one way or the other, but not much.
Any more questions? We need to approve the waiver. Somebody would care to make a
I'd
motion?
move to approve the waiver for no topology plan.
A second?
Okay, no second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any more discussion on granting the waiver? Michael Ray? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, so the waiver is granted.
Well, I don't see an issue with the A and R itself and question whether or not this is a buildable lot, but because it's irrelevant to the approval of the A and R, I would move that we approve the A and R.
Well, the A and,
Can we get a second for discussion purposes?
Second.
Okay, now,
Any discussion?
the A and R basically is in our hands based on frontage and area. And then what's questionable about the area, right? You're saying, I mean, you've told us that we're only looking at frontage if it's, meets the zoning for an A and R, correct?
Well, it needs to have some area. It has 2.67 acres, which is the required, more than the required lot area.
40,000, right?
The frontage, it has frontage. Might not be adequate frontage. It might not qualify as buildable, but the A&R does not require or certify that a lot is buildable.
And they do have the note, planning board
Yep.
endorsement is not a determination as to conformance with the zoning bylaws, which is good.
Correct.
Is that requirement in our bylaw
Yes,
yet?
it is.
It is, awesome. I have no issues,
I guess my only question is, previously, they've had to do, since there's a building on one of the lots, I think recently required a Title V be done, and
Well-
just questioning why.
What the Board of Health requires is that there be adequate reserve area.
Okay, and they have.
And so, again, not being the Board of Health, I would infer that on 27 acres, finding reserve area is going to be fairly easy. And on 4 acres, either the house is new enough, or the system is new enough, or they've identified where the system is and have identified on the plan that there was a reserve area when the system was installed that's not being impacted by the swap.
Okay, I would assume they
I
would.
checked on the area that is there is not close to the reserve area of mine or for John's.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
any more discussion?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
You're all set?
thank you, gentlemen. We're gonna need to sign these.
Yeah, but you can sign those after the meeting.
Hilario. Is everyone ready to move on? Alrighty, we have a second A&R for 508 New West Townsend Road and 994 Northfield Road rear.
I didn't notice that until now.
If they're honest.
Right?
I don't know. Can you
Good
just state your
evening.
name
Yeah,
for the
Neil
record,
Gorman from David E. Ross Associates, representing the applicant and owners of the property, John and David Saliba. You just can't do that quietly. And we are here tonight presenting this A&R, which is fairly simple. Back in 2007, lots 1 and 2 were cut out of the remaining land of the Saliba property, which is some, right now, 259 acres. At the time, in 2007, the previous surveying company and engineers had the A&R signed, but Lot 2 did not have the adequate area to meet the reduced frontage lot area requirement of 160,000 square feet. It only has 140,863 square feet. So we are proposing to cut parcel C from that 259 plus acres and add it to Lot 2 to make it compliant with the 160,000 square feet area minimum requirement. So it's a fairly simple A&R. It was something we caught when we started working for the Salibas, and, you know, to bring the property into compliance with zoning, so if they do go for a building permit, it has the zoning requirements. So we're adding 19,877 square feet, which is parcel C, to lot number 2. And that's all that's happening with that big plan.
Are there any questions from the board?
None of parcel C is wetlands?
No, the wetlands are marked on the property down underneath it there off of Pearl Brook.
Okay.
And these are both, neither of them have an existing house.
No, they're both vacant lots at the moment.
And I assume it's not in this document, but Lot 1 already has the acreage required?
Correct.
Okay.
Is there any waiver requests along with this now?
Not that I believe so. We submitted a topographic plan as well.
Yep.
So there was some questions with regards to the abutters.
Yes, this plan that I brought tonight, and I gave to Marjorie, is the corrected version. They wanted us to, some properties had changed hands on the big, there's so many abutters to the 259 acres that there were a few properties that needed to be corrected, and
Okay.
and those corrections were made.
And the plan in your packet is the corrected one.
And there's no butter notification required for an A&R, right?
There's not.
Looks like all the approvers already went through too. I would move that we approve the A&R.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No motion, yeah, that's. No motion's necessary for A&Rs.
Of course I have it. Today's the 8th, 9th. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I do need to recuse myself for this next one.
That's up to you.
I'm not.
Well, it is your choice. You
Should I?
are,
I don't have any financial impact, right?
I would,
I wouldn't think that it's a conflict of interest.
I'm not ethics, but I think that there's potential financial impact. I mean, if the flooding is
Better safe than sorry.
adjacent to your property, and it's not necessarily just financial impact, it's also appearance of.
Okay. No problem.
All right, moving into our next, is everybody ready? Yep. Sorry. Moving into our next appointment, we have the Village at Flat Hill. We have a drainage review, and this is brought to us from comments made at the Board of Selectmen meeting. And they requested that we have it added to our agenda. I was at the meeting, so I offered to put it on our agenda for tonight. So. Adam, give us a...
Figured one quick noise is better than a bunch of, a long, short.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you give a brief
Oh.
description of?
Of the issue?
Yes.
I also see that the abutter is here tonight. My understanding of the issue, and again, this is from tertiary emails and having a conversation with the DPW superintendent, there is a cross culvert, several cross culverts on Flat Hill Road that run from west to east. So from the town center side to the Shirley side of the road. And these cross culverts were put in a decade or more ago as a way to handle drainage on the west side of the road that was flooding out the road. And they were carrying that water directly under the road and pushing out into a swale on the east side of the road. I believe these were done after the construction of the villages at Flat Hill. I don't have an exact date, so that's something we can certainly confirm as we look into this. And over the past 7 or 8 years, the amount of water being conveyed through these culverts and into the drainage swale on the east side of the road has measurably increased and is having a deleterious effect, specifically in the winter, as it ices over and causes some potential safety and property damage. And if I'm not mistaken, it's also starting to creep into some of the properties on the east side of Flat Hill Road. I don't have anything that specifically says that. Most of what I've seen is in the right-of-way, but I seem to recall reading in one of the emails that may have been happening. I think what part of the concern is, and it may date back as far as the mid-90s when the village was permitted or the early aughts when the village was constructed, that the construction of the roadways and the detention basins that support them within the village of Flat Hill is contributing to either the volume or rate of water that is being put into the right-of-way. There are 2 detention basins at the intersections of Cortlandt Circle, and I say intersections because it's a loop road. It does have 2 intersections with Flat Hill Road, and each intersection has a detention basin, adjacent to it. Those detention basins both have spillways that are directed in an easterly direction towards the shoulder of Flat Hill Road. Again, I'm not an engineer. I don't want to say that they were constructed incorrectly or correctly. We have a letter in our file, which I believe may be included in what was presented to the Board of Selectmen from the engineering consultant who reviewed the construction of the village at Flat Hill and said that they were honky-dory, for lack of a better term. I went out there this afternoon, or this morning, to just kind of get my eyes on what was there. Both basins have some woody growth along the slopes, which is not something you generally want to see on your detention basins. It's certainly not large trees. I would say that they're all between 2 and 4 caliper. So they're relatively new, and there's some low brush woody growth. The basins were both holding water, and both outlet control structures had been modified. My understanding, in conversations with the DPW superintendent, is these modifications were made around 2010 in response to some of the initial concerns. And what it looks like is on the approved plans, there is an orifice of 6 inches called for in both outlet control structures. And now in these detention basins, there's a 24-inch diameter corrugated metal pipe that it serves as the outlet control structure. So we're kind of in the Wayback Machine for materials here. Galvanized metal and water aren't necessarily the best combination. Often you see these constructed out of concrete. Certainly nowadays, that's sort of your standard. I didn't have my waders, so I didn't go in the water, but looking at it, it certainly appeared the original orifice that was drilled in the pipe was probably close to 6 inches. And there was another section of pipe that had been cut out of a newer galvanized pipe and had been bolted on and had a smaller orifice drilled in it. Again, I'm going to speculate. I would say it was probably down between 2 and 3 inches. So I don't know if that was done in response to the initial complaints as a way of, well, if we drill a smaller hole, it's going to give the basin more room to collect, and it's going to let it out at a slower volume. It's going to come out at a higher rate when you're pushing it through a smaller hole, but that's, and both pipes that lead from the outlet control structure were partially underwater. Probably between half an inch and an inch, so nothing crazy, but you would hope that that water would have moved along or infiltrated. There's probably several things that could be at play. The nature of that soil has changed or was misevaluated originally. I would venture an inference that the basins have either never been cleaned or have not been cleaned recently. And I say this from looking in the retained water. You can see, especially on the northern basin, there's a half-moon stone check dam that surrounds the inlet that would serve as a settling basin or a sediment forebay, and it certainly doesn't seem to be more than some stones kind of laid across the ground. Now, I don't know if the stones have over time collapsed, if the sediment has collected so much, if it was constructed incorrectly. We certainly did have a peer review engineer at the time who was reviewing them. What the veracity or quality of those reviews are, I don't know. I don't know the firm that did it, so I don't want to comment on that. But that's sort of where we're at now. And how the board wants to handle it is certainly, I think what the discussion tonight would be for.
So I have a couple questions, if I may.
Sure.
Okay. So I presume that, based upon the way the permits were issued for this property, that the board is in its right to enforce maintenance on the design as it was structured and approved, correct? Or is that enforced through the...
That's enforced through the zoning official.
Okay, but we
But you could certainly say,
letter.
look, we've reviewed our permits, there's this issue that's happening, there's this operation and maintenance, is this being followed? Could you check on that?
All right. So my second question is, presuming that was done and the maintenance was performed, do we have any indication that with the maintenance, it'll actually meet the water runoff requirements that would have been established at the time that the permit was issued? And if not, what do we have the authority to do to enforce a remediation, given that the design was previously approved by the planning board?
I'm going to give you an I don't know on that, only because, again, not an engineer. I know...
It's not an engineering question.
Well, it is in a way. You asked if it would meet the water runoff requirements of the approval. That's very much an engineering issue. I know enough about engineering to be dangerous, but not enough to actually do real engineering. So, in theory, yes. If you performed the maintenance and restored the basin to its intended construction, it would be meeting the flow rates that were intended.
So do you think it's possible that it never met the required flow rates? Because my understanding is that this has been a problem since the construction was new.
And that could be true. I think also it was approved in 1996, prior to there being a stormwater management regulation. It was a handbook or a guideline at that time. And, you know, I would really have to go back and look at the wetlands and where it fell within the Wetlands Protection Act, and how the two played together and what the requirements were. Now, what the board could do in hindsight to force retroactive correction, I'd really have to look at that and probably talk to council. And I think that that's probably something that would come as, you know, once the maintenance is performed, and there's a reevaluation of whether it's meeting it or not, okay, do we have any recourse at this point? You know, I try to be practical and realist about this. I don't want to tell anybody, yeah, we're going to go get them, and we really can't. I'm not necessarily optimistic.
I'm just curious if...
No, and I appreciate the question.
I'm just curious if in the course of the maintenance that has to be performed, if there was some, you know, inexpensive design changes that could mitigate the problem that could be recommended to become more compliant with what we expect of these types of situations now, if we could be in any kind of position to request that. Well, I guess you can always...
You can always request it. And honestly, it may be in their best interest. There may be things that would make it easier to maintain or function in a way that they had less trouble with. I don't know that they necessarily think about it. You know, you can always ask. If they're unwilling to do it, how much can you push would be sort of a question I would want a little bit of counsel on.
Fair enough. All right. So,
And I only say that because the board approved it. They've clearly signed off on it. It's been operating for, you know, almost 2 decades. And that, you know, you get into a dicey situation when you come back 20 years later and like, hey, you know, we know this didn't work then, but now we want to fix it.
Well, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, it's good.
So, yeah, so basically what concerns me a little bit is I think some of these communications and concerns go back nearly 10 years. which,
Correct.
aside from Marjorie, predates any of us. And I'm just curious as to why it wasn't brought back to this board. Any of those concerns were brought up to this board since it was approved by us. And there have been communications between the DPW director and the engineer of the project. So I'm just not sure. Again, you weren't here at the time, and we weren't here at the time, but if something like this came to my attention, I'd want to do a review of it.
It's a completely valid question, why it wasn't brought back to this board and why there wasn't some review. I don't know.
And my next question is the drainage system, from what it appears now, has been modified from the as-built that was approved, correct?
Correct. And, you know, not being an engineer, but it's a minor modification. I mean, it could easily be reversed. I don't know that it solves or exacerbates the problem one way or the other. You know, I think probably what it does is it slows the volume, but it increases the rate, which just cause different problems. You know, it's a sustained flooding over a longer time with a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Erosion, or a large flood that may take a little bit longer to recede and may cause a greater safety problem, which is one better than the other? I don't really know. You know, and my understanding is that there's a property on the north side of the southern intersection of Cortlandt Circle and Flat Hill. Beautiful white house, nice red barn, that recently installed a new mounded septic system. And they were receiving some overland flow of water from an area up gradient. So up towards the development at Flat Hill. There's a vacant parcel behind them, and then the association at Flat Hill owns a community parcel that has some open water and some trees and stuff on it, and it was coming from that general direction. And they were concerned about this raised system that they had just invested significant money in, and they created a swale to carry the water around it. And now the water comes off of that hill at a very high velocity through this swale and deposits into the road, further causing impact on this cross culvert and then the east side of the road. Where is that water coming from is an excellent question, because there's no detention basin back there. It's raw land and what has been a wooded and open water. Is it groundwater? Has the groundwater in that area risen to the degree that now, when it rains, it's such a shallow water table that it's carrying overland? I don't know. And if it has, what's the impact of that? Is it a change over time of the aquifer? Is it impacted by cellar holes? All of these things are probably outside of my scope of practice, but certainly are. It sounds to me, from what I've dealt with in the past and what I've heard from other engineers in situations, I would say somewhat similar to this, is the groundwater, it does fluctuate and can manifest in this way, where there's a greater amount of standing water and muddy, mucky area that begins to travel, especially downhill. But I don't know that I'm qualified, or that there's been enough study to say that that's what's happening. So there's this mystery of the water that's coming off of the north side of the southern entrance, and then there's the condition of the drainage systems. For me, the easy start is, let's look at maintenance of the drainage systems. That's something that should be being done anyway. And then, as that happens, investigate the other, instances of water and see where they lead us.
Now, there's, just down the street, there's the cross with Page Street,
Correct.
which does have culverts and water runoff plumbing, but that's not tied into Flat Hill Road?
So
There's no line that goes from these culverts down to where the Page Street connection is?
there is not. My understanding is that there is a series of stormwater infrastructure at the intersection of Page and Flat Hill. And I believe the DPW director has identified that as a place he needs to get into and do some updating, maintenance, repair, replacement. I'm not sure exactly
It
what.
overflows today.
Yeah, so-
I live on Page Street, and
And
my
I,
driveway washes out after every storm.
I don't know, I know that line does not travel north up Flat Hill. I don't
Okay.
know if it travels south down Flat Hill. These cross culverts and his discussions with me was, ultimately I can put a drainage line in and connect it down to Page Street. That's expensive. It's more to maintain, it's more water into that intersection at Page Street. If that's the necessary fix, then that's the necessary fix, but let's incrementally get to where that's the necessary fix.
Right.
And Flat Hill is still a little ways out on the paving schedule, so, one would,
Well, it is scheduled for this summer, I thought.
is it, okay, maybe, but that's still a
It's
little
not far
way,
out. But,
if the weather
so-
the way it is, that's a little ways out.
So I agree. I think that the very first thing is get the maintenance done.
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling that, based upon the history, that even once the maintenance is done, I think we're still likely going to have an issue there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to understand what's the next step. The two options, as I see it, is to try to mitigate it on the property so that there's less outflow, which is what we require nowadays, but was not a regulation at the time this was built. Or spring for enhancing the sewer, the stormwater drainage on that road, and tie it into Page Street, which may also include fixing what's on Page Street downstream.
And there may be some middle alternative to that, from the town's perspective on installing additional green infrastructure in the areas off of the pavement within the right-of-way that would, and it might not even be green infrastructure, it may be hard infrastructure, but that retains and/or infiltrates that water and reduces the rate at which it's discharged down Flat Hill.
Assuming that the groundwater table is not so high that you
Correct,
can't do that.
correct.
Because it sounds like we're having issues.
Well,
with it.
there are some other hard infrastructure items that could potentially be done even in a high
Oh,
groundwater area.
okay.
But, and again, I mean, that's exactly it. It's really getting in there and figuring out what's below the surface.
Right, so
and-
who
and
pays
what-
for that?
How do we get that going?
Yeah.
Well, that's the $64 million question.
Well,
Hopefully it's not that much.
I did some quick research since I heard about it, and actually the engineer is under indictment related to this project.
Oh, really?
For falsifying documents, so his statements in the communications from 2010 are somewhat concerning to me.
Well, I just want to correct.
And I don't want to indict his character.
No, but
He's
I
not
want
here
to.
defend himself, but
I just want to clarify that, though, that indictment is not related to stormwater.
It was
It's wastewater, which
Yeah,
is.
it was a septic issue.
Which is slightly different in that it's a septic issue, and when one has a wastewater operator's license, and again, not that the two can't be interrelated and that there can't be some question about the veracity of statements made, but it's not it's in conjunction to a continued monitoring of a wastewater system that is controlled by the DEP because it's a greater than 10,000 gallon volume and requires certain sampling and submission of reports. And this is an ongoing day-to-day thing that needs to be done, and this gentleman was not necessarily doing so in the confines of what the DEP law says. So your point is taken that, there's certainly some issues with the engineer who wrote the letter confirming in 2010 that everything was great. But I think also the board had a peer review engineer and approved the project as it was designed, which is somewhat problematic if even after maintenance is done, it's still not functioning appropriately.
Do we have the ability to do a periodic review of the project, even though it's been signed off on, and possibly have them absorb some of the cost of a third-party engineer review?
I'll have to reread the special permit. I mean, oftentimes, periodic reviews are for items that show up as conditions or are included as a matter of the approval. And if you're approving this design of the detention basin with the conditions that they maintain it and this, and I think it would be a hard sell to go back under the periodic review and say, okay, well, your drainage system was never properly designed, we're going to make you redesign it to meet these new standards. But I think certainly going back and saying you have to do your O&M plan, and here's what's included in that, and we need an annual report on that, is a different story.
Can we get a copy of the actual
Yeah,
decision?
yeah.
And then, was that before Conscom as well?
I would have to look at that.
And possibly they might have different information than us in their review or their order of conditions, so. I do see the butter in the audience, if she'd care to come up and make a statement. You don't have to if you don't want to.
And while she comes up, I want to add in that, looking at these photos, I think this is, appalling. That this has been such a long issue, and, I do have some questions of, even with the new stormwater standards, I know I've voiced this before, that during the construction of the high school, that, the driveway that I have down the hill from here was washing away. and we were spending tons just putting more gravel in. And then luckily, once the road was repaved, going down Mass Ave, for us, that it resolved that issue. And I think that when they repaved it, they seem to have a good sense of, controlling the water, keeping it on the road better. But the secondary issue is, now my basement's flooding for the first time ever. So I wonder, when you have a design that's even older than this, if the new standards may not be adequate, certainly the old standards. So I guess I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say, but what has this journey been? And what is the remedy that,
Sorry, if you just wouldn't mind identifying yourself.
Susan Whalen, 377 Flat Hill Road. I've lived in that property since 2000, purchased the land in 1998. So it was about 2002 that we noticed an abundance of water coming down Flat Hill. And at that time, my former husband and Matt met with Jack and I think it was Marion and was it Steve too? I believe it was a Whitman representative. And viewed the problem. And this was before the special permit had been signed at the time. So it was called to the attention of the planning board at that time. And
Sorry, do you remember a date or a year?
She said 2002.
2002, okay.
it was 2002.
Okay.
Then, between 2002 and 2010, I would frequently call Jack at the highway department and say, what's being done about this? In 2010, I actually called Marion Benson and asked her about the maintenance plan for the detention ponds. And she told me that there was no requirement that the village at Flat Hill maintain these retention ponds. And I says, well, how can that be? I mean, that doesn't even make sense to me. So she told me to address all my concerns to the highway department, which I've done, in correspondence for a while. And and the only things that got done was that culvert in front of, there was an unused culvert in front of 305 Flat Hill, and that was uncovered. The water brought across. There was Matt can probably give a better explanation of this than me. And then there was a catch basin that was opened up, and at that time the water was going into that, and that ended up flooding the fields at Allison's property. Then they installed this drain halfway down the south field on Allison's property.
So, I'm sorry, who installed that?
The highway department.
Okay.
And that water comes out with velocity and high volume when it comes out. You can see all of this erosion that has taken place in that area, and it comes down past my property onto that intersection of Page and Flat Hill. Sometimes it crosses the field, in the corner of the field, of Allison's field, and comes under the stone wall onto my property too, and kind of messes up my driveway. So I kind of was very patient and going through this whole routine. I had Jack out to the house and viewed that last April. It was about a year ago. And in August, he had sent me a letter saying that, that the water wasn't coming from the detention ponds, that it was coming from that undeveloped lot behind 268 Flat Hill, and that's what the problem was. And it was private property, he couldn't do anything about it, and he kind of just left it at that. Well, I didn't accept that, and that's when I decided to bring in more committees and departments in the town of Lunenburg involved in this, because it's just not a highway department problem. It's planning board, it's conservation commission, it's stormwater, it's everybody, and I think that's the only way it's going to get resolved, is if everybody works together. You know, the big question to me is where all that water is coming from. I took a walk up by that pond one day, and it's a large amount of water up there. Some areas have built up a little bit on the sides of it. I don't know how it looked before, but I couldn't see any water draining from it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't any water draining from it. But I don't know where the water is coming from. It's not originating in that lot at 252 Flat Hill, which is behind 268. I mean, that wasn't always flooded. So I'm not trying to get anyone into trouble or anything. I'm just trying to resolve a problem. I think in August of 2017, Jack had indicated that he was not going to put any drainage in going down for the rest of Flat Hill. But I don't know if he's changed his mind or not. Do you have any questions? That's a kind of a brief history.
I have a question for Mr. Allison. Not Mr. Allison, Mr. Bernie. Do you think is it possible, and I know, do you think it's possible that, you know, this sounds like an issue I've raised in a previous hearing. Is it possible that with clearing this land, and removing these trees, which have been sucking up probably some of this water, that is having a overall negative impact, that water that probably was being absorbed by trees or whatever, has there been enough clearance to have some kind of environmental impact, in your opinion?
I don't know. Well, I mean, anytime you clear land, the stormwater runoff is different, and that's why they have different coefficients for wooded land, grassed land, meadowland, pavement. So clearly it is different, but it has 4 stormwater basins that are designed to handle this. Whether that design is adequate, I'm again not qualified, nor do I have enough information to say. But again, I would infer that the intent, whether well-meant or not, would be to have handled that flow. I mean, the only way to not change the way water runs off of land is to never cut anything down. I don't think that's a realistic thought, because even people who aren't developing land want to cut the trees down for money or, land management or wildlife management, whatever it happens to be. So, yeah, sure, the cutting of trees could probably have had a effect of changing the way water is absorbed or run off. I don't know that it changes the water table, though. But again, I'm not a hydrologist. I don't think that I could definitively say it does or doesn't. In a brief review of the stormwater report, there is not an operation and maintenance plan as we would see in current stormwater reports. We'll have to go back and look through the file and see if there is anything in there, and see what the conditions were. Generally, one expects that if you're going to install facilities like that, you're going to maintain them.
So, if indeed what Marion told Susan is accurate and there are no requirements for any stormwater maintenance in the permitting process, then where does the responsibility lie with getting that maintained? Does the town assume the liability for all that because we approved it?
I don't believe so. It's private property. I mean, that would be, let's say, Brixmor decided to stop maintaining the parking lot at Walmart in Hannaford, and a sinkhole developed, and you break your axle driving over it. You're not going to come to the town and say, hey, you approved that, they're not maintaining it, you need to do something about it.
Something similar to that almost actually happened. It's funny that you-
I think I actually remember the meeting that you didn't come to because of that. But I don't know where one goes with that, and I don't necessarily want to speculate because of where my thoughts are going with it, and I would prefer to verify that what I'm thinking is correct before I say it in a public meeting.
Good. All right, well, I think the first thing we have to do is find out if there is anything in the permanent approval process that does indicate maintenance. Then it seems like we certainly have something we can take up with the building commissioner and get enforced. Beyond that that's where I'm puzzled with what our next step is beyond that.
Mr. Bernie, you mentioned 4 catch basins.
There's 4 detention basins. There's 2 at the intersections of Cortlandt Circle. There's 1 at the, up in the back, at the end of the other 2 roads. I think one is Alder and one is Willow.
Okay.
I don't know I think those are the names of the streets in there.
correct.
Yeah.
So they're off in the woods on the opposite side of the slope. So Cortlandt Circle goes up, Willow and Alder go out, and then the land drops off. And those are at the backside. So the 2 at the front are catching
Okay, that's
the
probably
front
why
side of the
I've
development.
never seen those.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't see them unless you were out in someone's backyard.
Yeah, there's a lot of wetlands around Alder Way.
Correct.
Where do those drain?
Off into the land that they own in common out in the back there.
Oh, out, it's a large
So if they're
area.
flooding their own land, if they're flooding anything.
That's fine.
Sort of out of sight, out of mind.
Okay. Any other questions?
I don't have any questions, but I thank you for bringing this to our attention, and I can't make any guarantees other than that we will collect as much information as we can and try and get everybody on the same page, so.
Okay, thank you.
I see another public comment, if somebody wants to come up.
Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. I had the opportunity to go look around that area up there, and I'm glad, I figured who brought up to the north of where the catch basin is and where the septic system is with the trench around it, and it got my feet very wet up there. You know, the water's coming out of the ground, literally. I mean, it's like a sponge up there, and there was a small trickle of a stream right around in that little trench, so it's coming out of the ground. But the thing I wanted to sort of add to your list to look into, which may or may not be on the prints you approved, the lot that's just to the north of that street, I don't know what house it is, but it's the lot between the septic and the retention area.
The
we're
lot in
talking
the
about.
rear?
No, right on Flat Hill. Is that the number? Yeah. Right on the corner, across from the catch basin. All right, between the catch basin and that septic area, that lot there. You know, there's 2 catch basins in the road that go into that retention area, and it's clear that was the design to take all the water off the road that's coming down people's driveways or whatever and get it into the thing. But what I was surprised to see is that on the lawn of that residence, there are 2 surface catch, let's call them grates, that are plumbed into that line that goes across the road into the retention area. They don't look like like they would be in a plan, quite frankly. They look pretty homemade. But they're taking whatever water is coming onto the surface into that lot, which is next to this other very wet area, and putting it into the catch basin. So you might want to, when you look at the plans that were approved, was that volume considered in the calculation of that retention area? Or is that something after the fact to take the water from that very wet yard and put it into the catch basin? So that's my only comment.
Thank you.
Please.
Hello, Matthew Allison at 305 and 188 Flat Hill. I appreciate the research that you've done on this, Adam, but the culverts that are under Flat Hill Road have been there since the 60s. There were no new culverts under Flat Hill installed. In fact, the first fix the DPW performed was to dig out the side of the road and backfill it with riprap, and I believe that is when they identified the first culvert that they have addressed and is now impacting downhill, which is Miss Whalen. And before I forget about it, there are 2 additional cross culverts on Flat Hill that impact 305 Flat Hill Road. They drain directly into wooded area that is in chapter land, chapter 61B, I believe. So Flat Hill is in fact a flat hill. So my family property has about 50 acres on the flat, and then it slopes down severely, heading easterly and north and southerly as well. This development was on 200-plus acres of land, 5 acres of which we used to hay. It was an agricultural field. We used to reap the hay off of it. The meeting that was held was on-site in Cortlandt Circle, adjacent to that basin across from 305. In 2002 was myself, it was Mr. Whalen, it was Jack Rodwikins, it was Marion Benson, and there was an engineer there. I don't recall if it was potentially Marsden at that time, or if it was in fact one of the engineers from Whitman Bingham. Whitman Bingham was the design engineer. David Ross did the as-built. The design was approved in '96. The as-built was performed and submitted in 2006. I would like to know exactly when the date of sign-off from planning was, because, again, we had that meeting in 2002, well before it was signed off on, and everybody involved at that meeting was in agreement that there was an issue. To get back to the NEEG, the input that's referenced in this packet, yeah, the indictments may be moot, but also that individual I know personally is not registered as a professional engineer. So I'm not quite sure his validity to make such statements. So the 305 has a fieldstone foundation with a dirt floor basement. We had a sump pump in there that ran maybe 2 or 3 times a year before the development went in. And in the, excuse me, in the past month of March this year, it has been going off every 3 minutes. Not only that, it's the 3rd sump pump we've had. We've had to replace 2 previous that have gone out, and each time we increase in size. The Flat Hill was paved last October with a base course. It was just an overlay. And then apparently, I thought that was going to be it, but apparently the intention is to make another overlay. Currently, there's a 150-foot plus long longitudinal crack right in front of the septic and the stream and 49 Cortlandt Circle in the brand new pavement. The standing water in the basins is actually the groundwater table. These detention basins, a detention versus a retention. Detention is supposed to detain water, and within, I believe, 72 hours is not supposed to hold water. I think you go out any time of the year and you will see standing water in those detention basins, which is indicative of groundwater. The outlet structure, which you've indicated as a 24-inch corrugated metal, it's a vertical. The water in it is well below the orifice that you observed that was capped. It's intruding from below. So I mentioned the 2 additional cross culverts on Flat Hill that severely impact. We've spent thousands of dollars mitigating this excessive drainage at 305 Flat Hill. Since the property is in the forestry program, we've got forest roads that we need to maintain. Oftentimes, we can't even access that lot. And further down, adjacent to Miss Whalen, we have a 6-acre agricultural field, which also, at times during the year, we cannot even access because it is so full of water, impassable. Excuse me. Yeah, there are only 2 basins that discharge to Flat Hill. And I appreciate your analogy, Adam, but I am not driving a car on somebody else's driveway or parking lot. I am living at a residence that I was born at. My parents have owned since 1968. So I would just like to correct that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
What do you think the remedy here is, Matt?
I'm not even going to suggest that. I will say that I am a certified soil evaluator in the state of Massachusetts. I am qualified to do perk testing and soil evaluation. The soil out there is C-type at best. It is glacial till. Flat Hill is a drumlin. There was a mile-thick glacier pounding down on that soil, compacting it so tough that it looks like clay. Clay is actually a particle size, but it is very, very, very impermeable. Before it was all open field and wooded area, plenty of fetch for the rainwater to travel slowly downhill and seep into the ground. And again, the sump pump in our fieldstone dirt floor foundation goes off every 3 minutes, and it's not even, well, it is just getting into April. The last month went off every 3 minutes, still currently.
Excuse me, thank you.
I'm not going to make any speculation as to repair. I do appreciate the attempts that DPW has made. They have made 4 attempts in my recollection. The first attempt was to dig out a large section between Flat Hill and the detention pond in question and backfill it with riprap, which is large stone, in hopes that it would infiltrate that way. And my understanding is when they dug that trench, they found the cross culvert for Flat Hill, which incidentally was, when my folks moved in 68, they had a complaint with the Board of Health for the neighbor's septic was basically just going into that culvert. That got addressed, their septic was repaired, that culvert was forgotten, was buried, was not even visible. The first fix was to dig a hole and fill it with rocks. The second fix was to dig up that culvert on both sides of Flat Hill and install a catch basin with no sump and no outlet. And I'm not quite sure what the thought process was, but the result of that was 2 to 3 inches of water from the westerly side of Flat Hill coming to the easterly side of Flat Hill, bubbling up out of the catch basin grate, which caused a 400 or 500 foot long streak of salt stain in our lawn. The third fix was to give an outlet to that catch basin, which I don't know why they stopped halfway down the field, but they stopped halfway down the field, built a head wall, connected it to a 4th cross culvert coming from the corner of the 24-acre orchard and our neighbor across the street at 3 something. And then the 4th fix, of course, was to, they put a paved apron on Miss Whalen's driveway, and when they resurfaced the road in October, they also put a small berm, which is up gradient from the flow in the right-of-way along the side of our field, so it gets in behind it. I mean, DPW's actions have all been to keep the water off the roadway, and that's what they're charged with. They need to keep the roadway safe. They're not necessarily charged with protecting the neighbors or the abutters or whatever. It was made very clear to planning and DPW and the design engineer that there was an issue well before it was signed off by planning board.
So, one question for you, Matthew. Because you're from the area, this 252 Flat Hill Road that everyone's talking about with all the water in it now, do you know the history of when that started to have a lot of water in it?
I do. Again, it is Flat Hill, and it's got very, very tight pore soils that don't permeate very well. They're very small pores in them, so they're not going to hold a lot of water. That originally was a 4-acre parcel of 268. When the Murphys, somebody bought it in 90, I believe, and the Sandersons lived there since the 60s, I believe. And when the Sandersons lived there, that back lot was plowed and planted.
So it was actually an agriculture lot, so it was, theoretically, it was dry at that time.
Yeah,
It wasn't swamp water.
So the theory of permeability and pervious surfaces and whatnot is that there is no way that a vacant lot is going to cause drainage problems unless there's a spring. And again, we're at the top of a hill. There's no spring.
So where do you think the water's coming from? Is it just the surrounding properties?
The 20 acres of impervious.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
So I guess we need to gather some information, would be the first step.
Yeah, so Matthew definitely confirmed my concern that even if the maintenance is done, it's not going to meet the requirements for not creating an issue up there. So maybe as you're doing the research, you can find out what our recourse could be. I mean, I can only think of personal recourses, like lawsuits and so forth, so I'm not sure what the planning board can do with regards to rectifying this issue.
I'm similarly at a loss as to what the board might be able to do retroactively on a plan that they had peer-reviewed and approved. But let's look at the file and see what it says, what conditions were placed, and
Okay.
see where we can move forward.
Do we keep the application information, not just the decision?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we'll
There's a
have the
packet.
whole file, okay. All right, thank you. Any more public comment regarding this issue? All right, again, thank you for coming out. We don't need any kind of motion.
No.
Okay. All righty, moving on. We have a public hearing, or a continuation of a public hearing for 654 and 658 Massachusetts Avenue.
Thank you. Greg Roy, Ducharme Dillis. We were here 2 weeks ago and presented the initial, at the opening hearing. And since that time, just to bring you up to speed with where we're at, we have revised the plans, which I'll get to in a second. We have also opened the hearing with Conservation Commission last Wednesday. They didn't have any concerns, but they did want us to get through this meeting at least before they close their hearing. So we expect to be doing that next week. In response to the comments we received from your board and also the review comments that we had prior to the opening hearing, we have revised the plans. We issued a letter on dated April 2nd. I think you folks have that in your material in front of you, where we summarized all the comments that we received from both from the peer review consultant, Graves Engineering, Jeff, and also the various comments from the town departments. We also summarized, to the best of our ability and recollection, the comments that we received from your board. The most significant one, I thought, was, or the one that required us to do the most work, was to create some environmental, traffic, and I think community impact reports, which we did do, and attach those for you. So I just wanted to give you a real brief summary of what we did, and then talk. We did get some final comments from Jeff this afternoon, which I would like to just go over real briefly. But let me just go over what we did to revise the plan in response to your comments. Pardon me, I just need to get my... Jeff had a few, I'm going to pull this. Jeff had a few comments relative to the stormwater system and calculations, so we did address those. The most significant thing we did was to add a small little depression down here at the end of this swale, which picks up the runoff from the back of the property. That was one of Jeff's most significant comments. This sounds really hot. I need to put this. Okay. We did tweak this a little bit as well, just to make sure we had the volume correct. There was some runoff, curve runoff things that we needed to modify, which we've done in the model, and submitted those back to Jeff. All of Jeff's initial comments have been satisfied by his latest memo. There was a few typos that he pointed out, which were where there was a discrepancy in our drainage calculations, but those didn't affect. We have the required water quality volume and recharge volume. We just had a typo on one of the calculation sheets, which is easily correctable. Another comment that actually the board made, which was a good comment, was relative to the width of the driveway. So we've added a shoulder, a 6-foot gravel shoulder to the entire side here to really do two things. One would be to allow some overflow parking. So we've effectively widened this to 18 feet. So you have a pretty good width there. We really would not like to increase the amount of pavement on the site, so we're proposing a gravel surface that could be maintained and plowed, and certainly durable and drivable, and dust-free would be the term that I think was used last meeting. And it would also, so that's the first, additional parking would be the first benefit. The second benefit would be vehicles. If there's a vehicle queuing to leave, there would be a way to get into this, there would be enough room for another vehicle to pass next to it. I see that as a pretty infrequent occurrence, but it was a good comment nonetheless, so we've changed that. And I think the other, two other things. We did add some trees here. That was another good comment that the gentleman that owned property down this way, that there's a pretty good corridor here. I can verify that of it on site. So we did add some evergreen type screening there, which I think was what that gentleman had in mind. And then we revised the sewer connection and the water connection in response to the comments from both the DPW and the Water District. So we've added a sewer manhole and stubs that come into it after discussions with Mr. Rodquins, and the water connection is shown as a new connection as well. Additionally, as I mentioned, we did submit a traffic impact report, environmental impact report, and I think there was a community impact report with that as well. So I won't go through that unless you have any specific questions. I did want to talk briefly, and then I'll stop. Jeff from Graves did give us some follow-up comments on the information submitted. By and large, His initial 21 comments have been addressed, with the exception of what I mentioned with a few minor typos that we had in our calculations, but they don't impact the project still meets those required standards. He had 6 or 7 new ones, and I'm not sure, do you have these? Did you guys get these today?
They're in your packet, and they were emailed out
So this is a letter that he
afternoon.
just issued today, the April 9th, dated April 9th.
So that's the first one. That one.
We've actually already made these. We got them back to Jeff, and I was under no,
There it is.
we got them back to him late today. We got them back to him about 2.5 hours before the meeting, so I kind of had a feeling, I knew where, he wasn't going to get a chance to look at them, but I guess I wanted to just communicate that all these things are really pretty minor, with the exception of the first one where he says, second paragraph in number 22, he says, I'll just read it. Second sentence. However, it may not be clear to drivers on Massachusetts Avenue that gravel driveway is intended for driving surface, and the gravel surface will have to be plowed. Therefore, consideration should be given to increasing the width of the paved asphalt driveway to 18 feet for at least one car length at the driveway entrance. So he's talking about increasing the pavement width at the entrance here. Our idea was to just minimize the amount of pavement there. If that's something the board wants, we're certainly happy to accommodate that. So we would just be paving that 6-foot shoulder back, 20 or 25 feet to get an 18-foot paved entrance there. We've set this up so you could pave the whole, so you could plow the whole thing anyway and maintain it, the gravel shoulder the whole way, but we can certainly look to do that if that's the board's wish. Sort of up to your discretion on that. I'm not sure how you want to handle that. The other things are some minor on the revised HydroCAD models. We just had a couple of tweaks to do there. We've actually already made those. We don't find them impacting the plan much. Number 26, he asked us to tweak the plan slightly. There was a few numbers that needed to be adjusted in our stormwater volume schedule. This sort of relates to what you were talking about earlier. We try to put a stage storage so that the contractor knows exactly how big these things need to be at each elevation, so it jives with our modeled stormwater. So we just needed to collaborate that information, and he asked us to add a couple of spot grades on the top of the berms so that we could show where our emergency overflows would be. None of these things I see as too significant. So with that, I will stop. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Thank you for expanding the environmental section to reflect, what was stated at the last meeting. And for adding in, the trees to address the concerns of the abutter. Comment number 26.
Yes, sir.
By Graves Engineering. And 27.
Yep.
So what needs, on your side, what has to be done to remedy those concerns?
We had, as we were adding this model in, the models are an iterative process where you're modeling a volume to see how that interacts and so we had to update this basin slightly to reflect these contour elevations and the areas of these contours to update and make sure that it matched our HydroCAD model. So we had these a little bit smaller on a previous iteration of the plan. So we just needed to expand that slightly, and then subsequently had to upgrade that table, as I mentioned. Number 27 is again, relates a little bit to what I just said about the area of the contours, and also what I mentioned earlier about at the top of the berms where we have a small little spillway. We had that modeled in our HydroCAD to make sure that if the basin, if we get an extraordinarily large storm, we want to make sure we control where that water's going so it doesn't spill over the hole or go this way or something. We want to make sure we control it. So we've added those areas in, or we will. You don't have this plan. This is the plan that we revised this afternoon that I'm talking off of, but it's just a matter of adding those areas into and showing those on the top of the berm. I think that is a summary of those two comments.
So those are addressed in that revised plan?
In this one, but
not
it was
in
just this afternoon at 5, so I have copies if you'd like them, but they're not sort of stamped yet. I didn't think that was fair to you, so, but I wanted to have it so we could talk off it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, at the last meeting, I don't recall if we approved, I don't think we did, but I don't know if we approved all the waivers requested.
I don't think you did.
I don't think we did either.
I think it was implied that at least 3 of them weren't going to be approved. But I think the other ones might still be valid, so
Did we approve any of them, do you remember?
I see in my notes that, that there were some open comments. Traffic, I think, was one of them. Here they go. Traffic, environmental, and community.
Right.
Were the ones
Which
that
were
were the
addressed,
holdups.
yeah.
So I think, provided that you accept the report that we provided you, I think we could withdraw those waivers if that's acceptable to you. If the information I provided was acceptable to meet your regulation.
I think so.
That was our intention by supplying that. I didn't revise the waiver letter, but we can just amend it to remove those.
I'm confident the information you gave is adequate. Does anybody else have any concerns regarding that?
No.
Okay, that's fine. We can consider those withdrawn. I guess the one lingering, you've addressed all my concerns regarding additional parking and the screening from the abutter. The only lingering thing would be the board's opinion on whether they need to add the additional payment at the entrance to accommodate cars queuing.
I would venture to say that gravel is not durable dustless. It may be dustless, but it's not durable. It's not something you can plow.
I'd say it can be plowed as long as it's maintained properly.
I agree with that.
We don't. It's up to the board on that. We don't have a-
I think gravel's adequate. Again, it's going to be used for auxiliary parking, not.
Well, no, the discussion, I'm sorry, the discussion we had last meeting was that the first, 20 or 30 feet of it should be clearly marked as not for parking because it's the entryway for an incoming vehicle. And the width is important too because people traveling on the road are not necessarily going to infer that that is a reasonable place to pull off the road. I looked at the property today. It's got a 40-mile-an-hour sign right in front of where they're clearing. So it's 30 miles an hour headed east, and it's 40 miles an hour headed west. And their westerly sight distance, which I appreciate you putting on the plan,
Yes, we did have that
is
as well.
lower than the easterly. It's at 470 feet.
Right. You can see roughly down to the intersection of Sunny Hill, a little bit past it. There's a sign, I can't remember, there's a sign just on the other side of Sunny, I measured it, so I can remember. There's a sign just on the other side, and when the cars come to that point, that's when you can start to see them, and I think that was at 470 that way?
Yeah, so you actually measured it
I did, yeah.
with survey equipment?
With a wheel, yeah.
The wheel?
Yeah,
Along the road?
yes.
You understand how sight distance is supposed to be measured?
So I measured the stopping distance. So I measured the distance that when the car sees the vehicle parked in the driveway, they'll have 470 feet to stop.
Okay, but it's actually 10 feet in from the edge of the road?
Correct.
At
Yep.
3.5 feet high?
I actually did it 15 feet back, yeah, just to be
Oh.
conservative.
You can't run a tape along 15 feet back because it's all wooded.
You can see, so when you stand 15 feet, when I stood 15 feet back from the road in the driveway and looked down there, I picked the point where I could see the car, and then I measured the lane distance. So that's what you got. You got 470 feet of stopping
Fair
distance.
enough. It's in excess of the requirement,
Right,
so I'm not
yeah.
going to push it.
Yeah.
I would like to push our review engineer's suggestion that we have at least the paved width for,
We're happy to accommodate that.
That's fine. I mean, they actually exceeded what I was expecting. I was just expecting gravel along the outside of the entrances of the driveway to accommodate maybe three or four cars, and they've gravelled the whole
We
length
had
of
the
the
shoulder,
driveway
so-
for me, so.
Yeah.
and you would continue to maintain that gravel that's shown?
Yeah, we'll just pave the first 20 feet, 20 or 25 feet or so, and then blend it in, and then we'll just keep that gravel around there.
Beautiful,
That's fine.
beautiful.
Now, we had said no parking indications, so would that just be signs?
I don't think we actually made that real clear.
I think I remember talking about it, saying that we would, a sign on each side of the road.
I don't
on
think
each side
that
of
you
the road.
necessarily nailed anything down, but I
No?
think there was a universal support for, and it sounds like if the applicant's willing to pave, 25 feet, that paved area that's 18 feet wide would be the no parking zone. And then however you and he decide that it would be appropriate to maintain that, whether it's goring on the driveway, which is the fancy hatching paint, or whether you want signs, no one really loves signs, but
I guess we'd rather not stripe it on a residential use, so we'll probably just,
Yeah.
if you want a sign there, we're happy to.
I mean, if we're considering this to be a three-family unit, right? I mean,
Right, yeah.
I'm not sure that we should be going in the direction of making it look like a
Well, right, that's our
like
goal.
complex.
Yeah. We share.
Well, I guess it would be the most unlikely area to park regardless, because it's so far from the property.
Everybody would want to park as close to the building as possible.
Yeah.
So I don't see it being a huge issue.
Right, so I mean, I guess again, if.
So probably not an issue we need to really be worried about.
you could condition it and just have it as a condition in the approval, and should there be a problem, you could retroactively enforce it without the need for sign or paint or otherwise. If the board felt it was something they wanted to include or make a point of noting.
Mr.
happy to-
Bernie, I'm sorry.
We're happy to accept that. Good.
So you're saying as a condition of this, just a note in there, provided that, no one parks the first.
Correct, 25 feet.
But not have a requirement to put up a sign, because I think that that's tacky.
And then, at some point, if it's a consistent problem, that there's somebody parked out there, you go and you say, hey,
least you got the
there's a
condition.
special permit that you're not supposed to park here, please stop, and then if they don't, then it escalates into a whole thing.
If you have a condition in there, it is enforceable.
It is.
If you don't have a condition, it isn't. Right. I mean, that's the basic, so.
I'd be satisfied with making it a condition. And
Yep,
I
that sounds
think,
good to me too.
Sounds good.
I have no other issues.
Thank you very much. I think this is I think I said in the last meeting, I probably wouldn't agree with this being a
I appreciate that.
family dwelling, but I think this is very tastefully done. I think
you.
this is appropriate. Large percentage of the town, especially coming out of the public safety complex right there, will see this, and I think this is excellent planning job.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for responding to all our remarks. Before entertaining a motion to close the public hearing, is there any more public comment from the public on this issue? Seeing none?
I have a question, actually.
Sure.
Before we move anything. Can we move to close the hearing before we get the final set of plans?
You can, and
Should we not get the final set of plans and ensure that there's no additional concerns?
well, what I would say is you can include a condition that all the outstanding comments from the April 9th Graves Engineering Review Letter be addressed to the satisfaction of the review engineer. I did have a conversation with Jeff, and he said, there's nothing wild in there. It's really paperworky, ticky-tacky, making sure everything, is dotted and crossed and adds up. And he said even if there was a discrepancy that ended up having to change, they have plenty of on-site storage to cover either direction, just that the calculations need to bear equivalent with what the plan shows.
Okay.
And with the driveway, you can condition that the pavement be 18 feet wide for 25 feet back. That's really the power of conditions in these special permits is, mopping up this little stuff that you want done that either the plan doesn't show or you want to have some enforcement on going forward.
Yeah, I concur. I tend to be a little conservative on this too, because I know what can happen if you close a hearing too fast. I just don't. I think we can handle it with a condition at this point. I think they're pretty minor comments, so.
So a question, Adam, did you speak to them this afternoon?
To Jeff? Yes, we communicated by email this afternoon.
Was it more than 2.5 hours ago?
Was it more than 2.5 hours ago? It was probably 4:15-ish, so.
Okay.
Just before you got
it's 8
this.
o'clock, so.
Just before you got this stuff.
So I guess.
Yeah,
didn't see
he
this.
probably hadn't even seen this yet.
This was just before 5.
Did he confirm that he got it?
He didn't, no. It
So,
was just
he may not have even,
Yeah, and that, we didn't
Seen
expect
it.
it. We just were trying to, we tried to get it out as fast as we could this afternoon, so.
So if we do close the public hearing, then we can't hear from the review engineer on any comments, correct?
correct.
Correct.
He would need to acknowledge, per that condition, that what they've submitted satisfies his comments in the letter.
Yeah, that you can do.
But-
So we would just have a condition that all review engineer concerns are addressed in the final plan.
Right.
Correct.
And if they're not, how do we address that?
You don't sign off on the building permit
Right.
per the special permit.
Would we reopen a hearing?
Periodic review.
Well, you would have to include the periodic review condition, if that's something that you wanted, or he wouldn't get a building permit, and he could appeal to the zoning board of appeals for not being issued for zoning purposes, because site plan falls under zoning. And then building commissioner and the planning board could go in and defend why they wouldn't sign off and why the building permit wouldn't be issued, and it would be up to the zoning board at that point.
So, or we could just leave it open and save ourselves all that trouble.
You certainly, you could.
Okay.
I'm not saying you should do one or the other, I'm saying you can do
Sure.
both.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your input.
How would you feel about keeping the meeting open until the next meeting, so that you have a chance to go back and forth with Graves and make sure
I
this is
think I
all
might
set?
get some broken kneecaps in the parking lot, if you know what I mean. We'd really like to close it if you could find it all possible. But it certainly is your decision. This just gives us an opportunity. If you just put these in the condition, in the condition that we have that, it's conditional upon us meeting the satisfaction of the review consultant, we'll just work with them until it gets done, and it doesn't have to bother you any. We'll just, if it takes us 2 more times, I don't think it will, but if it did, then you just get the letter from him, and then once you have a letter from him, it's satisfied the condition. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Process-wise, this public hearing has been scheduled, and I think it is difficult for you to, when you get something at 4 in the afternoon.
Yeah, no, and that's not any, we just submitted the plans to him last week, Tuesday as well. So, Jeff is very responsive as far as peer review consultants go, and I do appreciate that. So, yeah, it's just a product of the way the process goes. But if we had some more subjective type comments here outstanding, I'd want to keep it open, because I wouldn't want to we'll go down a road that would be, we might have to, and it's sort of our risk here, that we might have to reopen the public hearing and re-advertise. That would be that's sort of our, that's our problem, right? So I just don't see that happening in this case, so.
Fair enough, then I'll move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Now we can-
Next, I would move that we accept the waivers, sans the retracted waivers, which include the traffic impact, community impact, and environmental impact reports.
Second.
All in favor, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 And lastly, I will move that we approve the plan with following conditions. Well, we have a standard set of conditions, don't we? Oh, have we not documented those yet? Can you ramble off the standard set of conditions for, as we will have them, that have to do with construction hours and all?
So the plan would be built to the approved plan, or the site would be constructed to the approved plans. They would abide by all other board and commission approvals. Construction hours, this is one that is certainly variable site to site. This is on a major road, but it is surrounded by residential properties. I would say that you probably want to be somewhere between 7:30 and 8 a.m. to 4 or 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 12 Saturday, no Sundays and holidays. But that's kind of in the ballpark.
Yeah, so, I mean, how do you guys feel about that? How do you feel about 8 to 4:30 or 7:30 to 4:30? Do you think it was 8 to 4:30, 7:30 to 4:30? What do we usually have for residential?
Usually it's 8 for residential, but
So 8 to 4:30, Monday through Friday, and then again, 8 to, actually, Monday through Saturday would be okay, and then no construction on Sunday.
Okay.
Is that acceptable to everybody?
Yes.
Also, pavement 18-foot wide, 25 feet back, and no parking in this section. And also, all review engineer concerns are addressed in the final plan.
and that we can do a periodic review if necessary.
So amended. Any other things we want to have in this?
I think that's covering them for the most part.
Okay, so that's the motion.
Second.
Any further discussion?
The approved plan, is that the one that was up there that we don't have?
Well, it
will
may be, or they may go back and forth, but the idea is that they will come up with a plan that Graves finally signs off on.
Correct, and then you will sign that plan.
Including the 18 feet,
Correct.
25 feet
So
back.
not the plan that we approve, but the plan that Graves approves?
It will be the plan that you have approved through this hearing, through your review of Graves' comments and looking for those comments to be satisfied.
So it's a plan forthcoming.
Correct.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. My second stance.
Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, thank you very much. All right, moving on to the continued public hearing of our warrant articles, continued from March 26th. Which is our bylaw.
All right. So, we had some discussion and some changes were made and sent out to you throughout the three articles for the most part. And I did meet with town council last week to go over his comments. There are a couple of things that have changed in response to town council. We'll start in use regulations by zoning district, which is probably the third, it was the third in my packet.
It's the first in my packet.
Oh, well, hey,
How about that?
you win. You will notice that at the end of the use table, there are 2 footnotes, and in talking with town council about 2 hours ago, there's a third footnote that will need to be added. The first footnote is the note that anything not included is prohibited, which is understood but not clearly stated anywhere. The second is in dealing with the overlay districts, and town council had not seen overlay districts included in use tables before. I've seen it done both ways, and we did talk about it, and the board felt that including the overlay districts was important. So what we did was saying that as it's shown under the use table descriptions is how the uses would be applied within the overlay district only, not the underlying district. And the third footnote that isn't in here, but I'm gonna put on the table for the board to approve as to be added, would say that for the purposes of this table, the use definitions in Section 4.1 shall control. There are some duplicative definitions in what was approved by the board and what is in Section 2 of zoning. There's a packet in front of you that looks similar to this, or looks exactly like this, because it is this. These are town council's comments, and he's highlighted the duplicative definitions, and there's no real vehicle for altering those at this time. But giving primacy to these definitions through that note will solve the problem in the short term, and in fall, we can go back and delete what's duplicative in Section 2. And then you'll notice there is some comment or notation in his draft that mentions defining institutional uses and how he is cautious of doing so. He didn't indicate that our definitions were problematic or that there was anything in there that he felt ran foul of the statutory or exempt definitions of institutional uses. It was more of a, hey, this is something that I always caution towns against, and the Attorney General will probably give you one of her general comments that says, I don't see anything wrong with this, but hey, watch out how you apply this, because there's always that freak case that causes everyone a problem.
So I misunderstood you. What are his highlighted words, like boarding home, dwelling, townhouse? What is it?
Okay, so dwelling and the other ones are defined in Section 2 of zoning, which
Okay.
we hadn't delved into yet. And so those are duplicative of this, and you can't have two definitions of the same term.
So
and
all
so-
of these highlighted words, we have two definitions of?
Well, we would if this were adopted, but the note under the use table would apply the definitions in Section 4.1 for the purposes of the use table,
Okay.
giving it control. Most of the definitions in here are more restrictive or more clear on all of the details of it, which the board worked very hard to kind of nail down, but
All right, so that's the qualification that you're adding onto the table?
Correct.
Just that the definitions come from this section?
Correct.
Not from any other section?
Correct.
Okay, now it makes sense to me.
So that was all of his real comments in there. The one issue or question that I put back to the board is we talked about kennel with reference to the building commissioner's letter and looking to have kennel match with the general bylaw. So the general bylaw says any collection of 5 or more adult animals, 5 or more adult domestic animals, not farm animals, pet type animals, qualifies as a kennel. And when we had defined kennel, it was
Household pet.
2 or more not owned by the resident, or some, haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, I see it.
The breeding, boarding, raising of, training of 2 or more dogs, cats, or other household pets of any age not owned by the owner or occupant of the premises and/or for commercial gain. So my recommendation, if you want to match with what would come in the general bylaw, would be to change 2 to 5. And of any age, and then it would strike not owned by the owner or occupant, and it would say on on a premises and/or for commercial gain.
That would then restrict everyone to only having 4 dogs.
Which we currently do.
Was
If you
that
have,
weird?
well, if you have more than 4 dogs, you need a kennel license, or more than 5 dogs.
Or 5 or more.
Oh, yes, it does say 5 or more, you're correct.
Yep.
And you need a kennel license.
Yeah, so
And,
five
you know,
dogs, you're a kennel.
I think it's,
I wasn't even aware of that, thanks.
I think oftentimes what happens is, if you, I mean, most people don't have 5 dogs. If you do, you either love dogs or,
You can for a short period of time after your dog has a litter.
well, that's why it says adult.
Oh, I didn't see the word adult.
But that is breeding.
Well, and that's only if you're, but that's,
Right.
it's not breeding if you're not selling them or you're not purposely, I mean, you know.
Your dog could just come home one day.
Yeah, exactly.
It happens, man.
Better than your teenager.
Dogs, some dogs have loose morals.
Yes.
So, you know, it's really just to, I think that if you keep 5 dogs consciously as a, hey, I really love dogs, let me, you know, you're taking care of them in a way that getting a kennel license probably isn't a problem. And it's just a matter of having the animal control officer come out, review the situation, say, yeah, I'm more than willing to issue a kennel license for this. Or you're someone who, you know,
Okay, so can you reread the definition? Because I just want to hear,
the boarding, breeding, raising, grooming, or training of 5 or more dogs, cats, or other household pets of any age on a single premises and/or for commercial gain.
yeah, so it doesn't say adult.
You're right, it doesn't.
It says of any age. So if you have 2 dogs and they have a litter, and they have 3 pups, you would be in violation of this.
Then, I mean, would you like to,
No, because this does say that the boarding, breeding, raising, grooming pets of any age not owned by the owner. So if you own all the dogs or the animals.
Right.
well,
okay,
no, but
not-
the
revised doesn't say they're
revised
not
would be
owned.
to
It takes that out.
change not owned.
Right.
Because
If you didn't
the,
sell them.
Well, read it again, because it does change the definition quite a bit.
I agree.
Yeah, it does.
yeah, I'm getting, I just wanted to pull up the,
This is no small flock.
the boarding, breeding, raising, grooming, or training of 5 or more dogs, cats, or other household pets of any age on a single premises and/or for commercial gain. We could change of any,
Why are we striking not owned by the owner or occupant?
because that's not part of the general bylaw for kennels, which is what you asked me to match it with. So the
So it sounds like the
general bylaw is
for
one
kennels is
paragraph
wrong.
and says, "No owner or keeper of 5 or more dogs shall erect a kennel for housing said dogs without prior written approval of the animal control officer relative to the construction, location, and capacity of said kennel."
Well, that's construction of a kennel. That's got
Correct.
nothing to do with having 5 or more dogs in your premises, which is
Then,
what
I
this
mean, we
is
can
saying.
certainly keep it the way that it is. Trust me, I like that definition, the way that it is. I don't want to go hinking around with it.
Let's keep it then.
Yeah, I'd say just change the 2 to 5, and then leave the rest of it the way that it is, and then it would be in alignment with the general bylaw.
Okay. So 2 to
Not
5.
conflicting,
Yep, that's fine.
okay? And then if you want to
So what
build
if
a
you own-
kennel, you still have to go
So if
to,
you own 20 dogs, you don't need a kennel. Well, you're not considered a kennel.
We need to ask the town clerk how many dogs she'll license for a property. Pretty sure it's a maximum of 10.
Okay.
Not sure, but
But you're okay with that theoretical possibility?
I am.
What are-
I'm the wrong
what is
person to ask.
another household pet that would qualify underneath this?
I would assume things like chinchillas, squirrels, foxes.
well, wait, we don't,
So,
what about the collective
Ferrets were
pets?
yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Monkeys.
Because what if you have 2 dogs and you got 2 cats, and then your kids each have a hamster or something like that?
Then you're over.
Hamsters are food.
No, you're still covered because those are owned by you.
Yeah.
So this definition still is fine. I think we can't take out the not owned by the owner occupant because
Okay.
that wipes out all kinds of pet situations that we're gonna run into.
You're preaching to the choir.
Okay,
Then we're good.
so I think we're fine. So if you have 5 dogs on your property that you're taking care of and you don't own them, or you don't own 5 of them, you're a kennel,
Okay.
right?
Works for me.
Or 5 cats, or
Yep.
5 anything else that you don't own.
So
I think ownership is a key one there.
then we move on to,
So, before you move on, I just want to go back to this use table.
use table.
Yes. Last time we met, there was a couple minor tweaks to this use table, but it is because the entire use table got highlighted, I have no idea what those tweaks
Well,
were.
the use table was always highlighted because it's an insertion into the
Right,
bylaw.
I know, that was what I put in the email that I sent you, is like,
Yes, I'm
how do
sorry.
I tell
can't-
what
So-
got changed?
Actually,
Has
in
everything
the last
changed?
meeting? Because the
Look
whole
at
thing has
the
changed.
blue block at the top is all new, and I actually have to correct that so it's not all blue. Uses permitted in all districts. Those are all pulled from section 4.1 per the letter from, this should be in your packet tonight.
This is what you need.
No, this is called, this is
here it is, all right.
the use regulations.
Sorry.
So that blue block is all of the uses from 4.1 up above, permitted in all districts.
Okay,
You'll notice that all of the sections say uses, residential uses, commercial uses, blah, blah, blah. We added district to all the districts up in the key. And you'll notice that there's now a key for what each of the box fillers mean. I've added a dash instead of the blank for prohibited uses, just so that there's something in there, so it's not a question as to whether or not something was inadvertently left out or whether it was purposely populated. So
Okay.
I went through and purposely populated it with the
Little
most
dashes.
benign symbol I could find.
okay.
It looks like an equal symbol in the chart.
Well, it's because it's underlined.
Yeah, because every
because
change
it's
is underlined.
I got you.
So then what were the other table changes? Because I thought we had
The only other
in
change was
commercial.
no, there was a disconnect between the table and the pros, because drive-through was left in as a definition, which was stricken. So now the numbering now matches up. So, drive-through.
41K5.
Yes, was K5, and hotel was the definition for K5. So, the Ks were renumbered to go back to 19 instead of 20.
Yeah, God, this is hard to do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is commercial. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is commercial.
That, and I added the clarification on the special permit between zoning board and planning board.
I'd like to make a comment that if the use table does span 2 pages, that the,
Yeah, well, what happened was when it was in Excel, it fit one way. Once it was pulled in, when I finalize the document tomorrow, you're talking about getting the uses onto the next page?
yeah, I mean,
the
they're
districts?
duplicated, but
Yes.
they're not on the top.
Well, that's where the split was in the
Okay.
Excel
Yeah,
page. So
no.
yes, I'll sort that out.
Yeah, formatting's always tough.
Formatting is critical.
And then the numbering from 41K9 to 10 that's not what we just talked about, right? No.
No, those just look bolded because of the gray. The red bolds out in the gray.
Mixed use, motel, 10 was motel. No, that was what we talked about. Drive-in. Oh, no, K10 was motel. Okay. 20. I still not seeing where it's clearly stating where the definitions are.
It's because it's not in there. I spoke with Adam 2 hours ago.
Okay.
2.5 hours ago. So it'll be footnote number 3 under the chart. So if you look at the use table, and then you look underneath, there are 2 footnotes. There'll be a 3rd footnote.
But I'm just talking like a header here. It says definitions.
Well, that's why it says uses, and that's what it'll say, for the purposes of the use table, the use definitions in section 4.1 shall control. So I think, to me, it's clear enough that residential uses are then defined under H. J is institutional uses, or I is institutional, J is recreational uses, K is commercial uses, etc.
So I've got to look at this document to find out what the duplicates were, right? So boarding house, multifamily, single-family, two-family dwellings, and townhouse.
It's only dwelling, it's not
It's
not the modifier, it's only the word dwelling that's not modified.
So the modifier is what I have issue with. I mean, we've got 5 different definitions that vary by 2 units. And they're all kind of, pretty much, not all of them, but there's a lot of similarity between the 5 of them.
And honestly, the definition of dwelling informs those decisions, or those definitions. Because in section 2, dwelling is defined as any building or part thereof used for habitation of one or more persons, but not including commercial accommodations for transient occupancy or trailers or mobile homes, however mounted. Dwelling unit, one or more rooms with cooking, living, sanitary, and sleeping facilities arranged for the use of one or more persons living together as a single housekeeping unit. So, single-family dwelling is, that definition of dwelling doesn't affect what single-family dwelling means.
Okay.
It informs it. Same with 2 or multifamily.
So in the table, 41H5, we have to get rid of that detached.
Yes, that was one of his comments. I thought, did I not take that out? Yes. That should have been stricken, I apologize.
No need, you're a busy guy. That's what you got us for.
And actually, those should read dwelling,
Yeah, not
as they read,
single-family
yes.
home.
Should read single-family dwelling and two-family dwelling, as it reads in the definition.
So we had talked about earth fill in the residential areas, I
It's a
think?
single-family dwelling, not a home.
Yes, and that's what I
Oh,
said,
all right, sorry.
both single and 2 should read that. Earth fill in the residential. And we did change that definition the last time around, and it reads as, for any purpose associated with an issued permit or approval of soil, sand, the addition, fill, or grading for any purpose associated with an issued permit or approval of soil, sand, shell, limestone, dolomite, gravel ore, rock, clay, peat, or any material by whatever process. So actually, that should be Y all the way across because it's with an associated permit. Going to town over there.
So for institutional, number 2, charitable institution? Can you tell me again what eleemosynary means? And why it's in this bylaw?
It is for the greater good. So working to boost people for the greater good.
Okay.
It's sort of the basis for most
Can we
charitable
say that?
institutions.
Yeah, we could say that, couldn't we?
How do you say that?
Eleemoncy. I have no idea.
Can we get rid of it?
I really like the word, though.
I know you do, but none of us can pronounce it.
Probably way easier to say than it.
Eleemosynary.
Eleemosynary?
Eleemosynary.
So,
Illuminated.
just to go back what I was saying before, because I thought we had talked about earth removal and earth fill. We said that it's cool to have a lot in the residential district and just dump dirt on it?
No, it has to be, we added into the definition, associated with an approved permit.
I just looked at the definition, and I didn't see that.
In the use regulations by zoning district,
Yep.
the addition, fill, or grading for any purpose associated with an issued permit or approval of soil, sand, shell, limestone, dolomite, gravel, or rock, clay, peat, or any material by whatever purpose.
Yes, but in the definitions, it says earth fill, the additional fill or grading for any purpose of soil, sand, shell, limestone, dolomite, gravel, or rock, clay,
hold on.
peat, or any...
Can I see the front of the document you're looking at? Yes. This is my updated version. You're looking at town council's recommendations. So he had that from February. This is the one that contains all the,
Yes, they all have lots of change bars, it's hard to tell them apart.
Dates and titles would be really nice, and page numbers.
this has dates, titles, and page numbers.
Yes, in the packet.
Nice.
Accessory uses, commercial district,
It's on page 13.
page 13,
Earth removal 4.
3,
earth fill,
earth removal.
Earth fill.
other uses, there we go, okay. Okay, I'm good, thank you. See, these are the changes I was saying, that it's, I know we
Yes, I
talked
know,
about it,
it's-
but finding them in this document is
I
impossible.
understand it, just I was trying to create this document so tomorrow I can walk it over to the town clerk and just hand it to her and say, here. Because that's what needs to happen, because the warrant's already been approved and they need to publish it. And she can't publish it without this.
Yeah, I understand, but for our purposes,
Yes,
what
and
would help is if you took one of these documents, accepted all the changes,
Yeah,
and then put your changes in.
Point
So we
taken.
could see
Yep.
what the changes were, in the changes.
the changes in the changes.
to the changes would have been
Running out of colors for
really
edits.
helpful. Or highlighting would have worked too.
Yeah,
but
that
then you
would've
would have had to go back and unhighlight them all. Okay, so those were the ones that I seem to recall.
Okay.
From our discussion, so I think I'm good.
So now we need to look at the overlay districts, because there's a couple of things in there.
Can we back up to the earth fill again? Excuse me? Should it be for any purpose not associated with an issued permit?
No, because
it's
then you're
allowed.
giving them the right to just have a lot and dump dirt in it.
Right.
And I think that's what we talked about not wanting to do.
Correct.
Okay, so fill, earth fill.
Correct.
Okay, so the definition of earth fill is blah, 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 for any purpose associated with an issued permit.
Correct.
Yeah, so if you're building a house and you have an issued permit for it, you can put fill on the house.
Okay, so why is it an allowable use if it's already been permitted?
Because we talked about making an allowable use and then thought different of it. So we could just strike it totally.
Yeah, I really don't think that fill belongs.
Because it's allowable as part of
You
the,
don't want to disallow people using fill on the property.
but it's not a primary use, it's part of
Oh, it's
preparation
a
of a lot.
primary use, yeah. So that's what I had said, I thought before, was
Yeah,
it
'cause
shouldn't
if
be a
they want
primary
to say they
use
live
in
on a hill
residential.
and they want to raise their,
So you want to just
flatten
take
out
it
their
out?
yard, I mean,
I want to be at Matthew's elevation at my house.
Yeah, well, they
I'm just
would-
gonna fill my yard.
So are we striking earth fill?
You can come over.
And then I'm gonna dump all my water, and it's gonna go down.
Are we striking earth fill?
Yeah, I mean, I
Well,
think,
strike earth fill completely?
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, I don't think we
Okay.
have a use case for it that's not associated with building, right?
That's fine.
do you think maybe, I mean, I don't have an opinion on this either way, because I agree that the permit's gonna cover it, but do you think it would help, for someone that's looking to do some kind of earth fill to see that it's only allowable in conjunction with the special permit?
No.
No.
Maybe it should, do we have one in here for excavation and
There's
earth
a-
removal and
yes.
fill, like what Keating's does? What is that
That's
refer
earth
to?
removal.
That's earth removal?
Yes, and that's actually issued by that special permit's issued by the Board of Selectmen currently.
Okay. What about if you were doing staging and delivery, but not removal? Like what Powell's does? They bring in material, stage it.
That
and
they
then-
remove from somewhere else.
Correct, yeah.
well, yeah,
So
no,
that's-
but
No, that's.
Would that be not
that's
earth fill and removal?
Processing or outdoor storage?
Okay, so that's not earth fill,
No.
okay.
Fill is when you're,
I know. So I just want to make sure that they fit into the
Yes, they-
definitions.
yes.
Right? So
I
if you
understand,
have a
yes.
business like that, there's a
no, I mean, they
definition
could be
for
a
you.
contractor's yard, they could be they're retail technically, because they're selling all of that material. Construction sales and services. All of those things.
I'll avoid the shameless plug.
You work there, right?
Opening a new location.
Ethical conflict avoided.
And the definition of bed and breakfast requires that the use complies with the definition of bed and breakfast?
I thought we got rid of that.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Are you looking in the latest version or the?
Oh, this is my
the new
marked up
one.
version.
No, it does.
It still says it, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so it should just start with provided that the dwelling is owner occupied.
What page is that one on?
Sorry?
It's on my page 9.
So, yeah, it's on page 9.
Oh, cool. I numbered them right.
Got it.
And then in mixed use, still commercial, mixed use. It indicates something, in the uses that require a special permit, which in the table none do, they're all Y, so.
No, in cases where the commercial within the mixed use requires a special permit. So
Okay.
if your mixed use were a medical clinic and an auction house in the limited business residential,
I get you.
you would have to go have your zoning board special permit before the planning board did a site plan. That's to avoid the, oh, but they already said we could do it this way. And then the zoning board feels squeezed into,
So just to go back to bed and breakfast, that was supposed to be state definition of bed and breakfast, correct? That's why we deferred that to a definition.
is that what it was?
Yep, because the state has a very specific definition of what a bed and breakfast is.
Okay.
So this is supposed to be the
As
use
defined by the
complies with the state definition of bed and breakfast.
There we go. Good catch.
Do we say state or Commonwealth?
Commonwealths.
Okay, thank you.
We're only one of 3 commonwealths. We have to be proud of that.
I'm trying to get some of this wealth that supposedly is in common, but,
Keeping it with the sense.
but for some reason, I have to write them a check for several $1,000s. So someone else is getting the Commonwealth.
Let's run away with the common
Apparently you
sense.
have too much of the personal wealth, so they're making your wealth common.
Apparently.
All right, anything else in this document?
Getting back to the public comment about storage, we've got storage. He wanted the vehicle storage?
Oh, yes.
We've got boat storage yard. We've got,
We do, because you guys wouldn't give it up.
Because we have a boat storage yard.
this is stuff we can address later on.
Correct.
for
We
another-
really don't have an auto storage yard.
Yeah, auto yard, I think, and that's what I was getting at, was we should probably add that, but not now.
I just hate to try and do that all now as we're wrapping up the public hearing, and
agree.
we're gonna be playing in this sandbox again real soon.
Yeah.
And, that's the kind of stuff that it's worth noting and bringing back when we come back to add other things. It's a living, breathing, growing document.
So I'm keeping this.
The only other thing I had was under accessory uses for function facility. I was thinking either farm or golf course added to that. Page 16, A1.
Now, I guess what I would say to golf course at least is, do you want a golf course to have a function facility without a restaurant?
16.
But when the,
Sure, why not? That's what catering service.
That's, I'm
it would
asking.
only be, but the primary use would be a golf course.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the restaurant would still be an accessory use to the golf course, as would the function hall.
Then
I just think I just think that's the one thing we're lacking in town, is a place to have events, and it seems to be, like, where do you go if you want to have a party with 50 people? Birthday party or anniversary party or something like that.
And I put that to the board as whether or not that's something they want to include.
Right.
You're talking about
Or even a
This is in
standalone,
the commercial
an
district,
Elks would be like a private
That's a private
camp
club.
or a private club, but I'm just
Yeah,
saying
he's
either a
saying-
farm or a golf course would be the
He's
two
saying in
other
the commercial
places.
district, adding as an accessory use to bed and breakfast, hotel, farm, golf course, and/or restaurant uses.
farm.
Because they could build a barn that would host functions.
The farm one seems a little odd. I can see the
Stillman's
golf
does
course.
weddings. Not Stillman's, Hollis Hills. They do it in a tent, but they do weddings.
They also have that
They also-
constructed function facility where their little store is.
They're also in Fitchburg.
Yeah.
Again, why send them to Fitchburg?
They're also
when they
arguably a
could do it here?
restaurant too. They serve food, beer and wine, alcohol.
We got a wine vendor for the
It
market.
would be another avenue for farmers to make money through their property and through their goods and things of that
Nope,
nature.
I don't have a
think
problem
that's
with
what we're working towards.
Do you want to add both or just one?
I'm okay with both.
Yeah,
These guys weigh in.
I'm cool.
We only have one golf course, correct? Or two? One.
One golf
Just one.
course.
One golf course, I mean, but,
And that's not in commercial district anyway.
right,
This is commercial district.
yeah.
I don't think you can have a golf course in a commercial
No.
I don't
district.
think we have any farms in the commercial district either.
Can't restrict them.
They're allowed everywhere.
I just don't think we have any.
So,
So is that like is that a flaw then?
What?
Well, I mean, we're saying the accessory use is allowing for a golf course in a commercial district, but we don't have a golf course in the commercial district.
And it's not an allowed use in a commercial district anyway, so we'll just we won't use golf course, we'll just
Just
put
use
farm.
farm.
Okay, so striking golf
Yeah.
course. Thank you.
so 254.4, limited business residential district, and, page 15.
Okay.
And then 4.5, commercial district.
Have the same accessory use, yes.
Okay, so the exact same.
Correct.
So then,
So we'll add farm back into there as well.
Okay, so I was just concerned that they were the same. They looked like they've been duplicated.
They had been, purposely.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, wait. So the recreation district does have auxiliary use of function facility, accessory use, where you would be able to apply golf course. On
No, it
page
doesn't.
15.
Recreation.
Oh, that's limited
That's
business.
limited business.
God, it's so hard to read this thing. So there's no,
You're telling me.
there's no accessory uses for
In the recreation district, that's
We
correct.
completely skipped,
Well, there hadn't been
accessory
previously,
uses, okay.
and the board didn't raise any desire to institute new. Basically, with the accessory uses and design standards, what we did was try to mirror what was there, and in, like the commercial and the industrial, we expanded upon them slightly by adding things like either outdoor storage or other uses allowed in the district that comprise less than 30% of the gross floor area. So if you are a producer and you have a retail location, or, something to that effect.
So 4.5A2 has two A's. Which
Has what?
Has A and then A. Should be A and then B. Just a typo.
A and then A.
yeah.
On page 17, the top.
Oh, okay. Yep.
that's weird. That's actually hard to do in Word.
Yeah.
If they
Come by it,
explicitly tell it
honestly.
to start
You can actually
renumbering.
try to do that. What was I saying?
None of these are actually numbered, it's all hand formatted and typed.
You're kidding me. Why?
Because I hate the numbering micro.
Autocorrect.
It drives me nuts. And I just turn the formatting characters on and set a tab and go through it.
Is there a way that, because I noticed reading through these definitions that there was a lot of reference and a lot of verbiage used to refer to site plan approval, site plan review, approval, site plan approval. Is it possible that we could somehow indicate in the chart what requires site plan approval?
No.
No? I mean,
Only because uses don't trigger site plan approval, characteristics do.
the
New
defined,
construction of,
4 more units.
4 or more units, parking lot
Anything that
renovation,
requires
this
a
larger,
special
additions
permit.
of 25% or greater, special permitted uses. So, I mean, it's a bevy of stuff that isn't use-based.
Sure.
So, you could have 2 car lots, and one could require site plan approval and one might not. Because one might be occupying a car lot that was already there, and one is building a new car lot.
So we've taken Village Center District, which was 4.17, and changed it to 4.7?
Correct.
And we didn't carry over all the stuff that we had under 417.
Such as?
We went through and itemized a whole bunch of stuff for, well, we went through, did definitions, artist space, banner, bed and breakfast, civic use, mixed use, multi-commercial use, open space, personal service, professional office. None of that stuff carried through to 4.7 that I saw.
Correct. Because all that stuff is defined elsewhere.
But we included it as allowable in the Village Center District, so how is it still allowable in the Village Center District? If we're getting rid of 417.
Well, artist would fall under... I think that was trade was where that fell into,
Trade was the best spot that I saw for a fit, yeah.
and it actually doesn't show in there. So I guess artist's use is the only one that didn't carry over. Because the rest of them are in the use table as allowable. From my recollection of what was allowed in the Village Center District.
And did we maintain the campus development?
Yes,
verbiage?
that's under the
that's in there.
special conditions.
Excellent.
So do we have to add in the artist?
We had a whole big use table already for that area too. With the reduced setbacks and whatnot? That's all going away?
No, that should be under that's under the special conditions, isn't it? And besides, that table's in 5... Where am I? Recommend area building signs, site design standards. You know, I don't see the table in here. Don't know why that's not in there.
But you know what I'm talking about, right?
I do. The design requirements.
Dimensional requirements.
Well, there's design, oh yeah, I'm sorry, dimensional requirements under F. I'll get them in there. Because there was a whole thing done, and I don't know why it didn't transfer over.
Did we also lose the Village Center District preamble?
Yes. Would you like that in there?
No, I wouldn't.
I guess we don't need it, right? Nothing, none of the other ones have it, right?
Right.
I'm really flummoxed why that's not in there.
You're talking about all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
There's parking requirements, it's got the building types,
Yeah.
the lot areas.
I'll make sure those get in there. I don't know how they got skipped out.
That would have been a huge loss.
I think you still have a development plan review in page 21, 2A.
All right, anything else in there?
I'm glad we saved the word thereby on page 53.
Page 52.
53.
Well, of course. Word's critical.
Thereby.
All right, overlay districts. So there were only a couple,
So you're gonna fix all the village center
yes,
stuff? 'Cause
as long as the motion includes making all the corrections discussed, I'll make sure that they get in the document. So in the overlay districts, there was a question from the building commissioner about the farming limitations within the water supply protection district. Council said that's a reasonable regulation and would stand up to the test.
Thank you. Thought it would.
Into the Lake Whalum overlay district, everybody's favorite. Under D1.
What
it says-
page?
Sorry, page 9. It says townhouses and garden apartments. We talked about that, and apartments has a certain connotation for ownership model, which we can't really dictate, and sort of gives the intent that we want certain things. So what we talked about, town council and myself, was changing apartments to flats. So flats connotates a one-level living space as opposed to a townhouse, which is generally up and down. And that just eliminates the inference that we want rental units or they have to be rental units. And then,
Does that also change then on page 11 where it says
Apartments versus flats.
garden apartment?
Very English.
on page 11.
There's a definition.
I was in that one.
Well, that's the long one to move on to.
About halfway down the page.
Oh, no, we're not touching that. That's a state-approved bylaw, we're not gonna touch that at all. That's Tri-Town Estates. So if we leave that, that should just stay as it is. And then under E, 3, I forget what the original language.
Maximum density shall be,
It said, it was talking about the maximum density, and it said calculating it.
yeah. No, 3 is right. That's what the wording we came up with.
What it used to say is the maximum density shall be 8 on lots of 10 acres or more.
No, but it actually, the maximum density shall be determined by the planning board. It had a different word, and we changed it to so as not to conflict with the surrounding properties.
Oh.
Because in discussing with him, the language that was in there was squishy and gave you a little bit of flexibility, but it also could hamstring you an appeal in that if someone came in and, I think it said in harmony or matched with or something like that.
Blend with, I think is the word I used, but yeah, I understand what you're saying.
So if it was all single-family and you put in multifamily, they could say, well, that's not in harmony. And this gives you, as long as it's reasonably
This is fine.
not in
I'm fine with
conflict.
this change.
I didn't think anybody would have a big problem with it.
So flats, is that defined anywhere? Are we gonna have to add a definition for that? Back
No,
in-
I think it's a fairly accepted term. If you use, if it's not defined, you use common accepted vernacular.
Okay. I'll buy that.
Town council didn't seem to think that there would be an issue with it.
It's nice and British.
I was gonna say, it sounds very English.
Yeah.
And there's no other,
Come over to my flat.
There were no other changes in there. The final changes were within the registered marijuana dispensaries.
Okay.
And this it's on page 8. So under number 2, we had the cultivation and/or agricultural processing allowed in all residential districts by special permit, but only if the applicant is eligible for protection under Section 413B and/or GLC 40A Section 3. So what this does is says only if the applicant, actually it said if the applicant is eligible, and we added but only if the applicant is otherwise eligible. So what that does is clarify that they need to be producing some manner of crop or other product that qualifies them under 40A Section 3 for an agricultural exemption, and then they can come and get a special permit for the cultivation of marijuana.
My only question is 4.13B is the old formatting, whereas 254.1C2
C2, it's D2, I'm sorry.
is the new. I'm looking at it, right now. I think it's C2. So in other words, what we have crossed out below, that's like in bold where it says 250, that's correct. And the 4.13B is incorrect.
Oh, you're correct. It's, yes. 254. C2, okay. My apologies. And you'll recall that previously there was a modifier at the end of that saying cultivation shall be within a building and 500 feet from a residential property line. Well, that would only apply in residential districts. So what we talked about is separating that out into a 4th bullet that says all cultivation must be conducted within a building, which must be located at least 500 feet from any residential property line. So that would travel to wherever someone were to locate one of these facilities. If you were in an industrial district that abutted a residential district, you couldn't follow the standard setback. You'd have to meet the 500 feet on the residential property line only.
So this essentially says you can't just do
Correct.
marijuana cultivation.
Correct.
You have to be a farm established to doing something else, and then you can...
Only in the residential district.
Right. and then
In the
you can
commercial
add
or
that.
industrial district, you can cultivate as long as it's inside and 500 feet from a residential property line.
But at the same time, the Mass General Law 40A Section 3, which is the ag exemption, has been modified by the Cannabis Control Commission to exclude marijuana from the exemption.
That's what he's saying, though. The way he worded it here, and I didn't even pick up on this until you explicitly pointing it out. He's saying, but only if the applicant is otherwise eligible for protection under 40A Section 3, which
Right.
means you're eligible because you're farming something other than marijuana there already, and then you can do this. That's what this is saying. That's why I said you have to have an existing crop of something. So you have to be, I don't know, on your property.
So it keeps it out of residence. That's it.
Yeah, if you
okay.
have a residential
Okay,
area
now I
and
get
you
it.
already have an existing farm,
Yep.
and you're growing and selling corn.
Okay.
Or you're
then
raising
in the middle of
cows.
your corn yard, you could cut out an area and put a marijuana.
Okay.
Because
growing
it says it's not
facility there.
farming activity based on state rules, but I think that what this wording does is it gives the farmers an opportunity to tap into
Capitalize
an
on
industry
it.
that may be more similar to what they're already.
And I don't know how long that, I know the legislature made that change in response to the ballot initiative. There's some push from farmers to reinstate it as an agricultural crop. So
This would essentially protect them. This-
yeah, I mean, either way, once you qualify, and, so that was.
Oh, which is interesting, actually. So an unintended consequences if they change 40A Section 3. But I guess then we're okay with that?
And
So I think that what we have to protect them is the 250, because they have, now with the new wording, it's and/or. So they can default to our bylaw.
And he actually.
Yeah, but the
town council-
and/or says, because the and/or is 48 Section 3,
Yeah.
if they're if they meet 48 Section 3, if 48 Section 3 changes to allow it, then they would meet it.
And I didn't do the deletion, but on page 9, he said there's no reason to have non-dimensional, you can waive any of the conditional standards. There's no 40A concern there, no taking of zoning board powers. He said, you grant them these special conditions and you grant yourself the power to take it away, so it's not a problem.
So we don't have to say
Correct,
non-conditional?
you don't have to say non-dimensional.
Non-dimensional? Seemed to make sense, but...
I mean, you can say it if you would like. You can't waive number 1, because that's a state requirement. So you could waive it, but they're not going to get their license from DPH or the
Yeah.
Cannabis Commission at this point. And that's that.
Okay.
And I'm in
So
the
we got quite a few
process.
changes there, it sounds like.
I think it's minimal.
So we should get a change of the change of the change of the change.
You'll get a change of the
document.
change of the change, yeah. And I'm in the process of putting together handouts for town meeting that will indicate, in general, what the
So you can
what the purpose of the changes are,
use them
what,
for potato chips.
and specifically what uses, if any, have changed the way or where they're approved within the use table, so that isn't a burning unanswered question.
Okay.
Alrighty, so I guess we're gonna need to close, before I entertain a motion to
Take some
close the
public
public hearing, is there any comments from the public? Yay!
Rare occasions, busted the shiny glasses.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. Again, I commend you guys for going through every word, every paragraph, every sentence in these things. And I've heard out on the street, oh, the planning board meetings are so boring, but they're boring because you guys make a point to go through every word, every sentence, and think about what effect it has. Mr. Allison asked a question about the auto storage on, I believe you mentioned industrial, or you were talking about both industrial and commercial. And I commend you again for not making any changes there until you have a chance to really vet the issues on those two used areas and the unintended consequences, which seems to be something that comes up quite often in many boards' decisions, so that we protect, in my mind, protect the industrial areas that we have identified. We don't have that much area. But if we loosen up the uses on that, then we could potentially end up with the industrial areas being used for purposes that could generate a lot more tax revenue in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would accept the motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. And we'll see you all at town meeting.
Well, we need to-
Oh, sorry.
We have
You need to make a motion
vote, right?
on each of the 5 articles.
Individually?
Correct. Article 1 being the use table and definitions for sections 4.1 through 4.7.
I would accept the motion.
So moved.
Can we amend that motion for with all changes discussed
Yes, you
at
can.
this meeting?
Amended, so moved.
Second.
And this is a favorable motion?
In favor?
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The second one is
The overlay districts?
the overlay districts. So I would accept the motion to accept,
Approve the overlay district, I move that we approve the overlay districts with all the changes that we discussed this evening.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question?
Sure.
I just
Can you come to the microphone and identify yourself, Mr. Rogers?
I got it. Dave Rogers, 82 Highland Street. I'm watching this at home, and it comes to the marijuana part, and I have a question specifically that I think would affect me. I live at 82 Highland Street. My house abuts the old Hano Farm. I'm having a senior moment here. I don't know the name of the folks, but they grow produce and that kind of stuff. And I think it's probably, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 acres, right? Does this mean that they could grow marijuana at that facility as long as the building is 500 feet from the property line?
And they were granted a special permit. So this is within the existing registered marijuana dispensary bylaw for medical marijuana only, as governed by the Department of Public Health currently.
Yeah.
And the way the bylaw currently reads, it is a by right use in the residential districts.
So right now it's by right.
You're kidding me. So anybody could do this?
Yes. So what this change does then is it stops it from being by right. It puts it into a special permitting process.
Yeah.
And it also really limits it to only being allowable on
Larger properties.
on farmland.
So it's farmland. I don't want anybody growing marijuana next to me. So what you're saying to me is, it's by special permit.
Correct.
So they have to go through the whole process. And what rights do I have as a guy that's lived there for 42 years and all of a sudden they can, and I'm not saying they would, that all of a sudden they can do something that I don't want them to do?
Well, they could have done it already. This bylaw was adopted in 2014, and this changes it to special permit, so you have all the rights of any
Butter.
Yeah.
a butter.
Right now you don't have any rights.
The change is making it more restrictive.
And this process, and it's not just anybody who can do it, it would need to be an approved licensee of the Department of Public Health.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, hey, well, actually, right now, your neighbor could be growing marijuana. Under the referendum that was passed in 2016, any adult can grow up to 6 plants with no need for telling anybody, up to 12 plants per household, with 2 adults or more. Without having to tell anybody, without having to get any special approval, they can just grow it.
Right now.
And right now, they can grow it outdoors. So what this does is it forces it to be indoors, and it forces it to be at least 500 feet away from property lines.
Yeah.
Forces it to only be on farmland, and
Yeah.
it also gives the abutters the opportunity to come here and, and then within the site plan approval, well, special permit approval process, you
Yeah.
have a lot of rights to explain how this is negatively impacting communities, how it's negatively impacting, neighborhoods. So what we're trying to add in is more protections for residents. Because right now luckily we've been, I think we've been unfortunate, but right now, this is all allowable.
So what guarantee do I have, and I appreciate you taking the time to explain this to me, what guarantee do we have that I would be successful if I went up and said, you know what, I've lived here and I've got grandkids, blah, blah. Plus the fact, you know what, I just don't want it here. I have none, right?
Guarantee? No, there's never a guarantee on a special permit. It's a subjective permit.
Yeah.
It's based on the merits of each individual case, each individual lot, each individual applicant, and what they're proposing.
Yeah. But this is kind of a unique place because there's a farm right in the middle of a residential area. Has been for years, a chicken farm, right? And I don't have a problem with the chicken farm and produce and that kind of stuff. But I do have a big problem with growing marijuana next to me. Call me old-fashioned, I don't care, but I have a big problem with that.
I also think if you were to look at it and draw a 500-foot setback from all of the residential property lines, you're going to find a relatively small portion of the lot that would be available and functional for producing an indoor growing facility. And I think the cost and footprint would most likely be, not a positive outcome for someone wanting to do that.
Yeah.
I can't make any guarantees.
Of course you can't. I hate to bring up old stuff, but, my house was put into an area that I didn't want it to be. And now somebody can grow marijuana out there. I mean, what's next?
Well, they already can do that.
I understand that. I understand that, okay? I truly do, but is there any way that we can tighten this up so that, a little guy like Dave Rogers can have a more pronounced say about what happens next door to him?
Well, one option would be to increase the setback, but I think that, my original proposal was to have a 2,500 feet setback from residential property lines, but as we discussed in committee, or on this board, that essentially would prohibit it, and we don't have the...
Isn't that too bad?
Well,
you can't.
We can't prohibit it.
That's
It's conjecture on your part if it would prevent it, right? I mean, you haven't...
What we did was, I think when we looked at that 2,500 feet as an example, I think that we realized that there's probably like 6 properties.
I don't think there's any property where you could be a half mile from residential and still be able to.
And that's an effective prohibition.
Yeah. I mean, that wouldn't stand up probably to the Attorney General's review, never mind any sort of court challenge.
But Dave Rogers, who's been here for a long time paying taxes, blah, 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 who's affected, has no say.
Well, you have say as an abutter within the special permit process.
Right.
So the special permit process takes into account impact on abutting properties,
or does it?
Noise, smell, vibration, et cetera, on surrounding properties, the impact of the use within the character of the neighborhood, and I mean, so it's not that you don't have any say. But it's not that if you alone came up here and were like, I don't like this, I don't want them to do it, and all your neighbors were like, this is great, they're gonna do this, they're gonna do that, it's gonna be great for the neighborhood, whoever's sitting up here is going to balance those two sides.
Yeah.
If you and most of your neighbors come up and are like, this is terrible, this is, that's gonna have a pretty significant impact, I would think.
I have no confidence, okay, in that. But I do have confidence if you were to amend the 500 to say 1,500, 2,000,
I'd like a larger setback, but I don't believe that that's something that would pass.
Well,
You can
Ask who? This
Well-
board?
Both.
this public hearing is closed, so they couldn't make any changes at this.
Okay.
No, Dave, I don't say that to shut you off. I say that so that they can't make the changes now. You're welcome to bring that change to town meeting and make that recommendation. And I don't say that to discourage you. I don't want you to feel shut down if they say, well, we're not going to do that now.
Yeah.
It's because they closed the public hearing already.
I appreciate that, okay? And I went to a town meeting on this Architectural Protection District and asked for my house, the last house, blah, 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 and I was turned down. So I have zero confidence that the powers to be at town meeting would be sympathetic to this thing after those that want this thing to go through. It's just unconscionable to me, really. I mean, I just don't understand it. Okay, and I appreciate your point about, you're trying to do more, but you're not doing enough for me. I just can't understand it. Selling marijuana next door.
Not selling.
Not
growing.
selling.
Oh, well, what happens? Somebody just comes in and of course they're going to sell it.
Well, the RMDs are a little bit of a bigger vehicle, so.
What are RMDs?
The
Is that like a
registered
GMC?
marijuana dispensary. So the way that and Mr. Bernie can correct me on this, but the way that it's currently structured is, for the most part, you're supposed to grow and sell at the same location.
Okay.
Now, if you have a already existing RMD facility,
what's
a registered marijuana dispensary?
Okay.
So if you have a registered marijuana dispensary, you can get like a secondary location separate from where you're selling it at, to grow it.
Okay.
It's called a vertical license. So the one license.
Yeah, aptly. Yeah.
The one license encompasses cultivation, processing, and retail for medical only.
Yeah.
The way that the new the adult use marijuana that was passed in 2016 is structured is it's an a la carte licensing, for lack of a better term. So you can get a license just to retail, you can get a license just to cultivate, you can get a license just to process, you can get a license to be a certified testing laboratory, you can get a license to deliver, you can get a license that covers this, that, and that, and sort of pick and choose what you want, and you follow different application, licensing, insurance, et cetera, based on which options you choose off the menu.
So all of that could be done next door?
No. We have not done any zoning for that yet. There's a moratorium
You gotta
for that.
separate, you're talking about recreational.
No, I'm talking about, yes, adult use recreational. That is on a moratorium in Lunenburg until the end of November. So in the next 4 to 6 months, we'll be putting forward a proposal that has the regulations for how this board wants to regulate that within Lunenburg, where they may want to allow it, where they may want to disallow it, and under what circumstances. What we're talking about tonight is only registered marijuana dispensaries under the Department of Public Health for medical marijuana card holders only. So.
And they'd have to, if I'm correct, they'd already have to be an existing RMD in order to get this secondary location.
They'd have to go through the DPH licensing process.
So they get the first thing, which is, pretty easy to do, 500 feet, blah, 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 blah. Then they can go get the second thing.
No, I think they have to have the retail location first. So normally when you structure these things, you have one location where you're retailing it and growing. And so once you have your location where you're retailing it and growing, you can request a secondary location to just grow. And so what this does is it would allow that just grow to, but of course it's a multi-step process. I think the probability of someone coming, how big is the land near you? How many acres?
I don't know. A lot of it is wetlands, thanks.
So there's a lot of restrictions in that area. I mean, I think the probability is really low.
I love you like a brother. I don't buy it. So what you're saying is that my only recourse, right, is to go to town meeting and plead my case, and hope that and I'm not even saying that they're going to do it, because who knows, but, if they decide to do that, and then go on to the next step, am I right that I could have people going up that little driveway buying stuff?
No.
This is just for medical,
It's only the growing and agricultural processing, so the
You'd have
picking.
a truck going and picking up product and bringing it to the place that would sell it.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes, sir.
The property in question, the back property line itself is only 700 feet long. So I'm reasonably sure that would not be allowable on that parcel behind you.
Okay. See, that's good. Thank you for doing that, because I'm sorry to take so much of your time, because I really didn't know, but boy, you got my attention when I said, what are you, crazy?
No, we're not crazy.
No.
Not until 11.
Right, good. I like your sense of humor. I just think when you're talking about this stuff, me, I'll just use me. I don't understand how it's applicable. Now, and then when I heard what you're talking about, I said, Haynos, this, that could be applicable to me. That's why I'm here. When you're reading all of this stuff, I mean, I'm not too smart anyway, but you lose me. And I don't know what you can do to change that, but, you talk about the village district and the overlay district, and how does it affect us? Give me a practical application. You're talking about Powell's, you're talking about Keatings, and give me I hope that nothing happens to hurt those people that have worked so hard to bring industry into this area, et cetera, et cetera. And I can't help but tell you that when I'm at home watching this, I'm saying, is this the first time you guys have seen this?
We've been talking about this for
months.
probably at least 6 months.
Okay. So there seems to be a lot of questions about this stuff, and I'm saying, Jesus, I hope that that's not the case. So anyway, I've taken much too much of your time, but I hope you can appreciate my perspective. I mean, and
Very much so.
Yeah.
We want people to come and speak their minds, Dave. I mean,
Yeah.
That's what we
Well,
look
some
forward to.
people.
No, we do.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just kidding with
I
you,
know,
Greg.
but-
You know, this is a good board and stuff. I mean, I can imagine in 10 years, you know, when I die and Karen's going to sell the house and people come up and say, is that a marijuana plant? You know, and the value of my property goes. And, you know, I'm in the North Cemetery and Karen's down in Naples saying, well, you know, give me a little whatever, you know.
All right.
Anyway, thank you for your time.
No, you
I
can
just,
reach out to any one of us at any time. You
I
don't
know
just
that.
have
You've
to
been
come
very
here
helpful,
and-
but
and talk, you know.
These changes will better protect
Any
you.
questions?
yeah, well, okay. What you said, you know, makes me feel better for 750 versus 500. I mean, you know.
Yeah, it's not insignificant. It's about 25 acre minimum lot size. And that would be-
Really?
And that'd be putting it right smack dab in the middle.
Yeah.
It's a
Having it
big
be
lot
10
area.
by
I think
10.
about 1,000 by 1,000, right?
Sorry?
It's a pretty large area when you think about it.
Minimum 1,000 by 1,000.
Minimum is 1,000 by 1,000, and that doesn't account for any structure size.
Yeah,
Then your structure size gets added onto that.
okay,
So 1,000 by 1,000, think of how large of a lot that is.
yeah.
And then
So-
right smack dab in the middle is a pinpoint where you could potentially put your facility.
Yeah.
And for every foot your facility goes, that's another foot that the property line has to go.
Yeah, okay, you've made me
So-
feel better. I hope you know, don't think that I'm crazier than you already do think I'm
No,
crazy.
we
but I mean,
talked a lot about this topic, and we talked a lot about the offset number as well.
Yeah, all right.
We have.
Thank you for your time. I
A quick
appreciate
question
it.
for you, Mr. Rogers.
Yes, sir.
How many years did you spend on planning board?
I was on the planning board not long, a couple years, tops, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But you understand the weight that comes along with these decisions.
Oh, I understand, and I never liked
So
the
do we.
job, to be honest with you, and I'm not suited for it, and thank God that you're doing it. I mean, and I hope you're not offended by me asking these questions, because I obviously didn't understand it, and you've taken the time to explain this to me.
I'm sure you would have called me at like 10 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, a lot of good that would have done, right? It's already done, and I didn't know what the process was here. Anyway, thank you again, I'm sorry to take so much of your
Good
time.
seeing you, Mr.
Problem,
Rogers.
thank you. So,
All right, so I would move that we approve the solar and registered marijuana dispensaries with the adjustments that we discussed this evening.
do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And then we would need to do the
What's
final
the-
two articles,
what are the
the
other two?
changes to section 8.3 to adjust the special permit timeframes.
I'm not sure.
We looked at those the last time. I don't know if they're in your I thought they were in your packets tonight.
So I'll
maybe
let
they're not.
someone else make the motion on that one. 'cause
That
I'm not
was,
sure
it
what
was,
that is.
90-day thing.
it was deleting the 90-day from filing and the appeal to the building inspector and instituting section 9 of MGL 40A into the reference up above, so we're following statutory timeframes.
Yeah.
So moved.
Second.
Does that work?
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And then the final is the zoning map amendment to delete the retail commercial district and turn it into commercial, delete the Route 2 overlay district, and to change aquifer protection, or aquifer boundaries to water supply protection district.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Go team.
That's it. All right, well, thank you all for your hard work and attention to detail on this. It's been a long 2 years. So, but anyways, all right, moving on to minutes approval. Yeah.
Oh, I do.
The minutes from March 26, 2018. Does anybody have any?
Executive session?
Oh, we'll do those first.
Well, they were on top.
No, they're not, well, all right. The executive session minutes from March 26, 2018. Everybody get a chance to read them?
Yes.
All right.
No changes.
The regular minutes from...
Public hearing.
Oh, never mind.
All right. You good?
Well, there was something that was brought up in the office on the executive session.
It was amended.
Okay.
So.
Good.
the minutes from the public hearing on 9 Chase Road from March 26, 2018. Any comments? The minutes of the public hearing for 654 and 658 Massachusetts Avenue for March 26, 2018. Good.
The other two aren't finalized yet. So
That's
you'll
why
have
it's
them for the next meeting.
All right, committee reports.
Capital Planning, Stormwater Task Force, Ag, and AgCom, none of them have met since our last meeting.
MJTC is meeting this coming Wednesday, so again, no meeting since our last meeting.
MRPC is meeting on Thursday. No meeting since our last meeting.
Open Spaces, Dave, he's not here. Charter Review Committee.
So Charter Review, we had a great public hearing. I think the vote was 8-1 to proceed to public hearing. And it was a really good public hearing. Many residents came out. They were able to look at the document, the charter changes that we proposed, and I think we all felt, along the process, it was an active process of engagement with different boards and bodies. And I think having the final document at the hearing, we were able to get a lot more information from that public hearing than I think we were probably able to get along the way. I think the public hearing kind of pushed people to respond, probably. And so the Charter Review Committee voted unanimously to bring the changes back into committee, continue with the work, going forward, and try to target either a special town meeting later in the year. I think that was the goal. We do not have a meeting planned yet, and we will, I think, hopefully get one scheduled in the coming weeks.
All right. Director's items.
I don't have anything. Those are just what we're going to be moving on to in the very near future. I've been working on the handouts for town meeting and trying to get some enforcement action handled. I've got a meeting tomorrow with MRPC on the economic development follow-up for the DLTA, the business brochure, and the permitting guidebook. So we'll have an update for that the next time around. And tomorrow night, you all are going to the Board of Selectmen, talk agriculture with the AgCom, and economic development, so that'll be a good follow-up to that.
Is there any indication of when we're going to pursue a chairs meeting?
There isn't. I'll follow up with you beginning of next week on that.
All right. So Adam mentioned April 10th, tomorrow night's meeting with the BOS, April 23rd. Do we have any, you had mentioned there was potential projects, or if any of them submitted applications, or?
For solar?
For any of them.
I'm sorry.
Are we having any preliminary discussions or anything?
No, we do have, Tri-Town has submitted. They were deficient in some things, so we haven't scheduled a public hearing yet.
Okay.
But they'll be coming, I would anticipate it will probably be May 14th-ish.
But they have officially submitted an application?
They have, and we've sent them a list of the items that they're deficient in.
Okay, and that's to make
That's
the
to
remaining-
modify the building layout and get some waivers on unit requirements. They had sent a proposal which we had vetted by special counsel, because our current town council had represented them previously. And special counsel advised that, what they're doing is within the bounds of the bylaw, and the board is, has some options on how they proceed and some decisions to make, but once we have a final packet, we can discuss what those are. And other than that...
Is the intention still to make it senior housing?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And that's what would require the waivers. It's, reducing the larger bedroom count units and populating a larger single bedroom unit. And other than that, we've had, people indicate things that they want to do, but nobody really coming forward with any formal proposals, even even to, draft or pre-submission proposals yet.
All right.
Question on that? Follow-up?
Sure.
The Tri-Town development was a 40R project?
Correct.
My understanding was that Ms. Benson was the 40R officer, and now that she's not here, I'm not sure that we've designated that to anyone else?
I don't know that it's been designated. I've functioned in that way.
Okay. Is that gonna have, so we're gonna have a 40R application review, basically? They're gonna ask for a modification to the...
Correct, and it's not an actual application. They're asking for waivers under 40R. Because they have the approval, they're looking to modify that by gaining waivers, which the bylaw allows the board to do without need for public hearing, but they're also modifying the site plan, which will require a public hearing.
So how'd they get the approval?
They came and asked the board if they could do it.
Us?
Yes.
Okay. I forgot.
It's a weird little bylaw, but it works.
So will we also get development plan review on that?
Correct. You'll get site plan approval for the modification. And so we'll do the two in conjunction so that, in effect, it's a public hearing on the modifications, but it's not a public hearing on the modifications.
Gotcha.
Per the letter of the bylaw.
All right, May 5th is town meeting, 9 AM at the middle high school.
Bring your wife, bring your kids.
Yeah. Is there any public comment from the board?
I do. I have a public comment. No matter what, I think by 19th, 20th of next month, I'm no longer going to be a member of this board. And I am this board's appointee to the Charter Review Committee. So my understanding, based on the fact that this is an appointment and I'm sworn into it, is that the board can't just, I guess, reappoint someone to it. So where I'm coming from is I will be, no matter what occurs, my opinion is I think that it's important for a member of this board to be a part of the Charter Review Committee. If the board so chooses for me to remain in that capacity, I will certainly serve, but I also will be more than willing to resign so that the way the board can appoint another member to be a part of the committee.
We may have the ability to appoint a delegate. I know they did it with the school building committee.
It's a
reorganization.
planning board appointee. It doesn't say a member of the planning.
We could
doesn't have to
appoint
be-
you as a resident at large if you would be willing or want to remain on that committee.
I would prefer that you stayed.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my current appointment would not have to change with my lack of membership of this board body.
We may have to
Maybe.
amend it, but
But-
just because you wouldn't, but yeah.
I think you would probably just
Reconfigure
confirm
somehow,
that you
yeah.
were appointing him as your delegate to charter review. I mean, we can find the finer points of that with the town clerk.
All right.
Sure. Any public comment from the public?
I actually had one thing.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ken.
That's unusual for me, but just a quick correction. I had made a statement earlier that the minimum lot size for a marijuana facility would be about 25 acres. And just a little bit of back of the envelope calculations, I forgot about the case where there could be a circular lot. It really, you could, if you had a pure circle, you could do it in about 20 acres plus whatever the size of the facility is. So just wanted to correct that.
Just in case anybody has a circular lot out there.
Did you have
Well,
these
just I didn't
five,
want to be held
calculation?
to you said 25 acres, and this guy only has
21.
23 acres, but
How would
the
he have,
shape
he wouldn't have frontage.
provided for it, so. You know,
He could be in the middle of a rotary.
It's not gonna get laid out by any surveyor, I know.
Big rotary.
Okay, anyway,
All right.
I just wanted to correct a
Thank you.
statement that I didn't want to get corrected on in the future.
Is there any public comment from the public? Seeing none, ongoing items, I think we're gonna be pretty busy with town meeting and the
Yeah.
two directors' items.
And the economic development.
Yeah, well, we'll be addressing that tomorrow night.
Same thing with student initiative. I think we'll pick that up after May.
All right,
So move that we adjourn?
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 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 aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right, thank you. We have to sign those.
Yes.
You know,
Sign it.
we gotta